Bonjour, guten Morgen. Good morning. I can speak greetings in 5 languages, yet in all my 78 years, I have never dared to speak the truth in any of them. My name is Evelyn. To the world, I'm a powerful black countess, the heiress to a billion-dollar empire here in Missouri. But they do not know the price I paid for every single diamond I wear. I am the daughter sold by her own father in exchange for a noble title. I am the wife who had to watch her husband be murdered and framed as a junkie, simply because he knew too much. And most painful of all, I am the grandmother who unknowingly opened the door to a monster, inviting him in to destroy my own granddaughter's innocence. This story is not about boasting of wealth. It is the final confession of a survivor. Please listen, because you may come to realize, sometimes hell isn't a place of fire and brimstone. Sometimes it is a gilded mansion. Before we begin, please leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from, so I know that I am not alone on this journey. My childhood was a pendulum existence divided between the stifled brutality of the Ozarks and the calculated sophistication of the Missouri countryside. My father, Walter, started with the mud of the coal mines under his fingernails and built an empire based on organized crime and racketeering. Everything was duly shielded by the handshakes of politicians and the armed protection of corrupt police chiefs during the years of civil unrest and political machine dominance. But it was in the 60 seconds that he pulled off his masterstroke by buying the ranch. For those looking from the outside, it was a sanctuary for breeding equines. For us, it was an open-air laundromat. I grew up observing this financial alchemy operate freely in an era when digital banking oversight was non-existent and cash circulated in leather briefcases. The ranch was the perfect setting to turn dirty money from the rackets into illicit capital. And the secret was that no one could say the exact price of an animal. After all, how much is a horse worth? 10,000? 1 million? The answer depended solely on who was appraising and who was buying. Often, business partners willing to inflate prices at auctions. A colt could be sold for an astronomical fortune, or the semen of a prize-winning stallion could be negotiated for its weight in gold, and no one could contest it, for there was no fixed table for passion or genetics. Thus, between forged bets and theatrical auctions, the money stained with coal dust and blood from the South entered the accounting books as clean, aristocratic profit. I had 4 older brothers and lived in the center of this hurricane, where I never suffered racism, because in that world, the only color capable of defining a human being's value was the color of the money he carried in his pocket. As a child, I spent my days among horses, swimming pools, and grandiose parties. But I also saw the backstage of my father's empire. The ranch received increasingly important visitors, and the bets moved fortunes while the horses ran on the track and money changed hands out there. Inside the big house, life followed a very well-rehearsed script. I remember nights when the dining room filled with cigar smoke and the smell of imported bourbon. They were governors, generals, and powerful men who appeared on newspaper covers, all seated at my father's table. Walter was a black man who had barely finished school, but there at the head of that table, he commanded more than any doctor present. He spoke softly, but when he opened his mouth, even the loud laughter of the politicians stopped. The respect they had for him was mixed with fear, and I, even small, felt it in the air. And in the middle of these dangerous men reigned my mother, Patricia. The former humble teacher, who one day taught children to read in the countryside, had completely disappeared. In her place, one saw a woman covered in silks and diamonds, who learned the hardest lesson of that house, the art of not seeing. She smiled, served dinner like a queen, and never, ever asked questions. If heavy suitcases arrived at dawn, or if my father disappeared for days in the Ozarks, she simply arranged the flower vases and chose which jewel she would wear to the next event. I grew up thinking that was a woman's role, to trade one's voice for comfort, to pretend that the luxury around us had no price other than money. I was the little princess of that castle, protected and spoiled, not knowing that soon I would be sent far away to be polished, just like the rough diamonds my father used to trade. At 13, my life was packed into leather suitcases with my father's initials engraved in gold. He decided that the Missouri countryside and the dust of the ranch no longer served the daughter he protected so much. His plan was clear. Money could buy land and horses, but class needed to be taught far from there. That was how I swapped the humid heat of the Midwest for the cutting cold of Switzerland. My father chose one of the most prestigious boarding schools in the country. There I would be polished, transformed into a refined young woman, prepared to circulate among the global elite, without raising suspicions about the origin of our patrimony. The arrival at the boarding school was like entering another planet. The main building was a 17th-century chateau, surrounded by snow-covered mountains that seemed to touch the sky. The enormous windows let in a cold white light that reflected on the marble of the corridors. My room was on the 3rd floor, shared with 3 other girls. A French girl whose father was an ambassador, a German girl the daughter of an industrialist, and an English girl with a surname I had seen in history books. When I introduced myself, they looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and mistrust that I knew well. But what they didn't know is that I had been trained by my father never to show weakness. The routine was military in its precision. We woke up at 6 inches the morning to the sound of a bell echoing through the dormitories. Half an hour for bathing and tidying up. Then we went down for breakfast, served in the main refectory. Varnished wood tables, silver cutlery, white linen napkins. Classes started at 8 sharp and extended until noon, with subjects alternating between French and English, math, literature, art history, social etiquette, even posture classes where we walked with books on our heads to learn elegance. In the afternoon were the mandatory extracurricular activities: tennis, horse riding, swimming, ballet, or piano. I chose horse riding, obviously. It was the only thing that connected me to America, to the ranch, to my real life. In the first months, I felt completely out of place. The other girls talked about vacations in chateaus in France, balls in palaces in Vienna, seasons in London. I didn't have those references. My childhood had been on a ranch in rural Missouri, surrounded by rude bootleggers, drunk gamblers, and armed men who provided my father's security. But I learned quickly to lie with elegance. When they asked about my family, I said my father was a businessman in the mining sector and that we had rural properties in the States. Technically, it wasn't a lie. I just omitted that the mining sector involved racketeering and illicit trade, and that the rural properties were fronts to launder dirty money. The turning point happened in the winter of my first year, during a charity ball the school organized. It was tradition that the most important families in Europe sent representatives: counts, dukes, ambassadors. My French roommate was extremely excited because the Prince of I don't know where confirmed his presence. I had no one coming to see me, but my father, astute as always, had other plans. He sent a telegram to the school administration, informing them that the Baron of Rothschild, one of the most illustrious clients of the ranch, who bet fortunes on the illegal races, would like to greet me during the event. It was a lie, of course. The Baron didn't even know of my existence, but the name opened all doors. That night, when the supposed representative of the Rothschild family, actually a Swiss lawyer hired by my father, appeared at the ball and greeted me publicly, kissing my hand and talking to me in fluent French, the perception of my classmates changed instantly. Suddenly, I was no longer the unknown American girl. I was the young woman who had connections with one of the most powerful families in Europe. From that day on, I was included in the most exclusive groups, invited to weekend outings, accepted in the tightest circles. What no one knew is that that night was my first real lesson on the power of appearances. My father had bought my social acceptance with a well-told lie and a convincing actor, and it worked perfectly. I learned that in the world of the elite, the truth mattered less than the version you presented. This lesson would be useful years later, when I needed to hide tragedies much greater than the origin of the family money. The following years were a complete immersion in that universe. I learned to speak French without an accent, to discuss philosophy in German, to recite poetry in Italian. In etiquette classes, I memorized which fork to use for each dish, how to hold a wine glass, how to greet members of royalty without seeming dazzled. In dance classes, I mastered the Viennese waltz, the foxtrot, even the minuet. I became fluent in the language of the rich, that controlled tone of voice, half bored, suggesting you've seen everything and nothing impresses you anymore. But every vacation, when I returned to Missouri, the dissonance tore me apart inside. In December of 1963, I arrived at the ranch and found a party in full swing. Politicians, generals, businessmen, all clustered around the racetracks, betting fortunes while waiters circulated with trays of imported scotch. My father was in the center of it all, laughing loudly, closing deals with handshakes and discreet envelopes exchanged under the tables. My mother Patricia circulated among the guests' wives, elegant in her silk dress, talking about her last trip to Paris, pretending that was just an innocent social party. It was during those vacations that I heard, for the first time, rumors about imminent political upheaval. I was hiding behind a door when I heard my father talking to a senator. "When the administration changes, you guys are going to need safe places to move the money," said my father. "My ranch is at your disposal. No questions, no records." The senator replied something about a new order and expansion opportunities. I felt a chill down my spine. I didn't fully understand politics, but I knew that was dangerous and knew that my family was in the center of something much bigger and darker than I imagined. When I returned to Switzerland in January 1964, I could no longer look at my classmates the same way. They complained about banal things: the cafeteria food, the boring math teacher, the dress that didn't arrive in time for the ball. I carried secrets that weighed on me like stones. I knew the money paying for my education came from corruption. I knew my father negotiated with corrupt officials. I knew that when the power shift finally happened in March of that year, my family would be one of the great beneficiaries. And worst of all, I knew I was being prepared for something. My father wouldn't spend fortunes on my education, just out of kindness. He was transforming me into a refined tool, a polyglot, capable of circulating among the global elite without raising suspicions. I would be useful to the family business in ways I couldn't even imagine yet. This certainty terrified me and, at the same time, fascinated me, because a part of me, that part that had inherited my father's cunning, wanted to know how far that game could take me. In June of '64, 3 months after the political shift in Washington, I received a letter from my father. It was short and direct: "Prepare to return permanently in December. I have an important matter to discuss with you." It didn't mention what it was, but I felt my life was about to change forever. That summer, while my classmates planned vacations on the French Riviera, I prepared to return to the States and discover what my father had planned for me. I was 17, spoke 5 languages, and knew how to dance waltzes in European palaces, but none of that prepared me for what was to come. I landed in New York in December, and the America I found was unrecognizable. The air was charged with tension, a heavy atmosphere that hung over the streets like invisible smoke. National Guard patrolled the avenues. Newspapers stamped headlines about civil rights unrest, and conversations in restaurants were whispered, "Cautious." The political shift had consolidated the power of the old guard, and my father was exactly where he wanted to be, in the center of the new arrangement of forces, profiting from every change, every political realignment. When I arrived at the ranch, I found a transformed property. New pavilions had been built, the racetracks were more sophisticated, and there were armed security guards in practically every corner. They weren't just the rustic henchmen I knew from childhood anymore. Now they were trained men with military posture, using modern weapons. My father had expanded the business aggressively, taking advantage of the political chaos to strengthen connections with the regime. He waited for me in the library of the main house, a room he rarely used because he wasn't a man of books. He was sitting behind an imposing mahogany desk, smoking a Cuban cigar, wearing an impeccable Italian suit. At 39, Walter was the personification of power, a black man, self-made, feared, and respected in equal measure. When I entered, he didn't smile, just gestured for me to sit in the chair opposite the desk. The gesture was of someone conducting a business meeting, not receiving a daughter after 4 years of absence. "You look beautiful," he said finally, evaluating me with a calculating look. "Switzerland polished you well. How many languages do you speak now?" 5 fluently, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I learned from him never to show vulnerability. "Good, very good, because I'm going to need that." He put out the cigar slowly, a deliberate silence that left me in suspense. "Evelyn, you are 17 years old. It is time to contribute to this family that gave you everything. Elite education, travel, luxury. Now it's your turn to pay back." I felt my stomach tighten. I knew this moment would come, but I didn't imagine it would be so direct, so transactional. "There is a man," my father continued, "French, a count, ancient family, Louis of Beaumont. He has properties in France, a legitimate title of nobility, connections with European high society. He also has enormous debts and is on the verge of bankruptcy." He paused, observing my reaction. "I am going to save him financially, and you are going to marry him." The world seemed to spin for an instant. Arranged marriage. I had read about this in history books, about how elite European families used to negotiate alliances through their children, as if they were merchandise. But this was 1,000, 964, not the 19th century. Dad, I'm 17 and he's 37. He interrupted without hesitation. 20 years older. Yes, he's a widower, lost his first wife 5 years ago, has no heirs, needs money and a young wife who can give him children. We need a European title of nobility and legitimate connections in France. I tried to argue, but I don't know him. I don't even know what he looks like. He's handsome if that worries you, said my father with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I saw photographs, educated, refined, doesn't drink excessively, isn't violent. You could have much worse luck. The coldness of those words cut me like a blade. He was literally selling me, packaging me as a luxury product to seal a commercial deal. He got up and walked to the window overlooking the racetracks. Do you know what I built here, Evelyn? An empire. My great-grandparents were born in chains in this country, and my parents were sharecroppers who never owned the dirt under their feet. I came out of the mud of the mines, from absolute poverty, and created all this. But money doesn't buy everything. We are still new money. We still carry the scent of dirty origins. A European title of nobility changes that. When you are Countess of Beaumont, the doors that are still closed will open. Our businesses will expand to Europe legitimately. I will be able to launder money through his properties, and you will live like a princess in a French castle. And if I refuse? The question came out before I could measure the consequences. My father turned slowly and, for the first time in my life, I saw something dangerous in his eyes when he looked at me. You will not refuse, he said in a low, controlled voice, because you are my daughter and understand how things work in this family. Everyone contributes. Your brothers manage the business, take care of operations, assume the risks. You will contribute in the way you can, marrying well, opening doors, giving us respectability. He returned to the desk and opened a leather folder, pushing some photographs in my direction. I recognized the man immediately. I had seen him once during my vacation when he visited the ranch for a private bet. Louis of Beaumont was indeed handsome, with aristocratic features, dark hair combed back, a distant look. There was an elegant sadness in him, as if he carried the weight of centuries of family history on his shoulders. He has already agreed, informed my father. He comes to Missouri in February to meet you officially. The wedding will be in March, at a castle in France. I've already hired event organizers, stylists, everything. It's going to be the ceremony of the century. Politicians, ambassadors, European aristocrats. Everyone will witness the union between the Robinson family and the French nobility. It will legitimize our position once and for all. I stood there, holding those photographs, looking at the face of the man who would be my husband. I felt no anger or sadness. I felt only a deep emptiness, the understanding that my life had never really been mine. I was raised, educated, refined, all with a specific purpose. I was an investment, not a daughter. It is heartbreaking to realize that for Evelyn, extreme privilege was actually a prison. You might envy her Swiss education or her designer gowns, but ask yourself, would you trade your freedom to love for a golden cage? That night, she realized she was poorer than any farm girl out there, because at least they still owned their own hearts. That is the price of being born into stained silk. You might envy my Swiss education or my designer gowns, but ask yourself, would you trade your freedom to love for a golden cage? That night, I realized I was poorer than any farm girl out there, because at least they still owned their own hearts. You will learn to love him, said my father with an almost paternal tone, as if he were consoling me. Louis is a good man. He won't mistreat you. And who knows, with time, you might build something real. Your mother and I started out of convenience, and look where we ended up. I looked at him. At that man who had built an empire on stolen profits and illegal bets, who negotiated with corrupt generals and laundered money through luxury ranches, and I realized that he really believed he was doing me a favor. In his head, giving me a refined education and marrying me to a count was a demonstration of paternal love. Can I at least meet him before deciding? I asked, knowing the answer would be just a formality. Of course, replied my father, smiling finally. When Louis arrives in February, you will have time to talk, walk, get to know each other. But the wedding is already decided. Evelyn, this is not negotiable. I left that library with the photographs in my hands and the weight of a sentence on my chest. My mother waited for me in the hallway with a soft and understanding expression that irritated me deeply. I know it's hard, she said, holding my hand. But your father is right. It's for the good of the family. And you'll see, Evelyn, Louis is a good man. You will have a comfortable life, beautiful children, social respect. What more could a woman want? I wanted to scream that I wanted to choose my own life, my own husband, my own destiny. But I knew it would be useless. I was born into a family where women were pieces in chess games played by men. My mother accepted that role. My aunts accepted it. And now it was my turn. I just nodded in silence and went up to my room, where I spent the whole night looking at those photographs, trying to imagine what it would be like to live with that stranger with the sad look. In the following weeks, my father organized events at the ranch to present me to American society as the future countess. There were formal dinners with politicians of the new regime, parties where businessmen and military brass greeted me with exaggerated reverence, balls where older men kissed my hand and made comments about my beauty and refinement. I smiled, conversed in the appropriate languages, danced with impeccable posture, performing the role they taught me to perform. But at night, alone in my room, I cried in silence. Not for the loss of a love. There was no one I loved. I cried for the loss of the illusion that my life could be different. In Switzerland, surrounded by girls who planned to go to universities, travel the world, choose their own careers, I had started to dream of other possibilities. But those dreams died in that library before the cold look of my father and those photographs of a bankrupt French count who needed enough money to accept marrying a black American woman 20 years younger. February arrived too quickly. On the 14th, Louis of Beaumont landed in Street Louis for what my father called the courtship period. He would stay in one of the guest wings of the ranch for 2 weeks, during which we would have the opportunity to get to know each other before the wedding. When I saw him get out of the car, tall, elegant in his light linen suit, moving with the natural grace of someone born in an aristocratic cradle, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was more the realization that this was really happening. That man would be my husband, the father of my children, my companion for the rest of my life, and I had absolutely no choice in the matter. Louis of Beaumont wasn't what I expected. I imagined finding an arrogant aristocrat, someone who would treat me with disguised disdain, resentful for having to marry an American to save his finances. But when he walked towards me that February afternoon, he extended his hand and said in perfect French, "Mademoiselle Evelyn, it is an honor to finally meet you." There was something genuinely gentle in his brown eyes. My father organized a welcome dinner that same night. The table was set with the most expensive French porcelain, silver cutlery shining under the crystal chandeliers, imported wines that cost more than an American worker earned in a year. Louis sat next to me, and throughout the meal he behaved like an impeccable gentleman. He conversed in hesitant English, praised the food, asked polite questions about my education in Switzerland. But I sensed something in his silences, a deep melancholy that no words could hide. I suspected it might be because of the deceased wife. After dinner, my father practically pushed us into the garden, saying that young people needed privacy to get to know each other. It was February, winter in Missouri, but unseasonably mild. We walked in silence to the artificial lake my father had built years ago, where Japanese carp swam lazily under floating water lilies. The full moon reflected in the water, creating a scene of almost unreal beauty. "You don't want to be here," said Louis suddenly, breaking the silence. He spoke now in French, correctly presuming that I mastered the language. No need to pretend with me. The frankness caught me off guard. "And do you want to?" I replied also in French, feeling a sudden courage. He smiled, but it was a sad, tired smile. "Wanting is not the right word. I need to. My properties in France are mortgaged. I owe money to banks, to families who trusted me. My title of nobility is worth nothing if I don't have the means to support it." I appreciated his honesty, even if it hurt. "So we are two prisoners," I said, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. "You need my father's money, and I need to obey my father." Louis looked at me for a long time, and for the first time, I saw real empathy in his gaze. "Your age bothers me," he admitted. "You are 17 years old. You could be my daughter. This seems wrong on so many levels." He paused, throwing a pebble into the lake. "But your father made it clear there is no alternative. And honestly, Evelyn, I am too tired to fight." We sat on a stone bench by the lake, and for the first time we talked for real. Louis told me about his life. Born into an ancient aristocratic family, educated in elite schools, prepared to manage ancestral properties and maintain the family name. He married at 27 to a woman of French nobility, Catherine, who died of tuberculosis 5 years later without giving him children. Since then, he lived in self-imposed mourning, watching his finances crumble while trying to keep up appearances. He loved his wife. I felt embarrassed when he said that. Properties require constant maintenance, he explained with a tired voice. 10th century chateaux don't sustain themselves. There are taxes, repairs, staff, and I have no talent for business. My family has always lived off rents, land, inheritance. When the economy changed after the war, we didn't know how to adapt. He looked at his own hands, aristocratic hands that had never really worked. Your father offered a solution, enough money to save everything. In exchange, I give him my name, my title, access to French society. And I added dryly, come as part of the package. Louis didn't deny it, yes, but I want you to know that I don't intend to make this harder than it already is. I won't demand anything from you that you aren't ready to give. We'll have time, we'll build something at our own pace. There was sincerity in those words that disarmed me. I expected to find a monster, or at least a cold and calculating man. Instead, I found someone as trapped as I was, just trying to survive circumstances. Over the next 2 weeks, Louis remained at the ranch, and we spent time together under the watchful eye of my family. My father organized horseback rides, where Louis proved to be an excellent rider. He rode with natural elegance that came from generations of aristocrats raised among thoroughbreds. We had formal dinners where he talked to my brothers about business, always polite, always keeping the comfortable distance of someone born knowing how to navigate complex social situations. But it was in the private moments, in the conversations in the garden after dinner, that I began to see Louis as a person, not just a piece in my father's game. He spoke to me about France, not the glamorous Paris of tourists, but the deep France of rural properties, of small villages where everyone had known his family's name for centuries. He spoke about the pressure of carrying an ancient surname, about how every decision he took was judged not only by the present impact, but by how it would affect future generations. Sometimes I envy common people, he confessed one night, those who can simply live, work, love, without weight on their backs. He looked at me with a curious expression. Do you feel that weight of carrying the family name? I thought about the question carefully. Yes, but differently. My father built our name from scratch. He inherited nothing but poverty. So, the weight I feel is not of honoring the past, but of justifying the present. Of proving we deserve the place we bought. Louis nodded slowly, understanding. Your father is an impressive man, fearsome, but impressive. He built an empire in 1 generation. My family took 10 generations to build what we have, and I am about to lose everything. There was bitterness there, but also resignation. Perhaps it is poetic justice, the old order giving way to the new, families like yours rising, families like mine falling. At the end of the 2 weeks, my father convened a private meeting with Louis to finalize the terms of the deal. I wasn't included. After all, I was just the merchandise being negotiated. But my mother told me later, with that tone of someone sharing social gossip, not a commercial transaction. My father would pay all of Louis's debts immediately, transfer a substantial amount to his account as a dowry, and after that, send generous monthly payments for the rest of his life. In exchange, Louis would give me his surname, introduce me to French society, and facilitate my father's entry into European business circles. There were also clauses about children. I was to give Louis at least 1 male heir to continue the lineage. If I couldn't get pregnant in 5 years, the agreement allowed Louis to seek other solutions, although this wasn't explicitly detailed. My mother spoke about this with shocking naturalness, as if she were discussing a cake recipe, not her own daughter's reproductive future. The wedding was set for March at a chateau in the Loire region that had belonged to Louis's family for 300 years. My father hired a team of event organizers from Paris, stylists, florists, musicians. The invitation was on imported paper with the Beaumont family crest in gold relief. The guest list included American politicians, businessmen, some generals of the new regime, and on the French side, aristocrats, diplomats, and figures of Parisian high society. The night before my departure for France, my father called me to the library again. This time there was no coldness, only the satisfaction of a dealer who closed an advantageous deal. You are doing the right thing, he said, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon, one for him, one for me. The first time he offered me alcohol. Louis is a good man. You will get along, and you'll see, Evelyn, when you are living in a French chateau, with your title of countess, having beautiful and educated children, You will understand that I always knew what was best for you." I drank the bourbon in one gulp, feeling it burn my throat. I wanted to say so many things, that he had stolen my youth, my choice, the possibility of true love, that he transformed me into a bargaining chip, into a tool to launder not just money, but the family's dirty reputation. But I said nothing, just nodded, hugged him when he asked, and went up to my room for the last time before becoming another person. The trip to France was long and silent. Louis and I traveled together, but each lost in our own thoughts. He read books in French. I looked out the plane window, seeing the Atlantic stretch infinitely below us. I was leaving America, my family, my language, my identity. I was flying toward a life I didn't choose, with a man I didn't love, to fulfill a role that was written for me before I was even born. And the only thing I felt, surprisingly, was not fear or sadness. It was just an immense emptiness, as if part of me had died in that library before my father's satisfied gaze. When the plane landed in Paris and Louis held my hand for the first time, a gentle, almost paternal gesture, I realized my old life had ended. The Château de Beaumont was even more imposing than the photographs showed. It was located in the Loire Valley, surrounded by enormous gardens that seemed endless, with stone fountains covered in moss and centuries-old trees forming green tunnels over the gravel paths. The main construction was gray stone, with 3 floors and extremely high windows reflecting the French sky. It had that air of ancient things, of heavy history, as if the walls held centuries of secrets, but I didn't stay there when I arrived in France. I couldn't. It would be a terrible social scandal, a single young lady living in the same house as the groom before the wedding, even if he had separate rooms. Louis had reserved an elegant hotel in a nearby village for me and my mother, who came to accompany me. It was a small but refined hotel with only 10 rooms, frequented by wealthy tourists visiting the castles of the region. My mother was enchanted by everything: the hotel, France, the idea of having a countess daughter. She spent the days exploring local shops, buying souvenirs, practicing the few words in French she knew. I, on the other hand, felt increasingly trapped, increasingly aware that there was no turning back. Louis visited me every day at the hotel, always with the governess or some employee accompanying to keep up appearances. We went on outings around the region, always under the watchful eyes of chaperones, ensuring everything was appropriate. We dined in local restaurants, talked about superficial subjects, tried to get to know each other within the narrow limits society imposed at the time. It was during one of those dinners that I finally asked about his family. "Will your parents come to the wedding?" Louis stopped with his fork in the air, a shadow passing over his face. "My parents passed away," he said in a controlled voice. "My father died 10 years ago of a heart attack. My mother couldn't bear the loss and followed him 2 years later. That was when I started managing the properties alone, and that was when everything started to fall apart." He explained that his father, the old Count of Beaumont, was a traditionalist man who never adapted to modern times. He lived as if he were still in the 19th century, spending money he didn't have to keep up appearances, refusing to work or involve the family in business, because nobles don't engage in commerce. When he died, he left enormous debts and mortgaged properties. Louis's mother went into deep depression and died soon after, leaving him alone, widowed, and bankrupt. "I have no siblings," continued Louis. "I am an only child. All the family responsibility fell on me, and I wasn't prepared. I was educated to appreciate art, literature, history, not to manage businesses or save fortunes." He looked at me with a tired expression. "That's why your father was the salvation. It is a tragic irony that brings them together. The daughter of a man who conquered the world, and the son of a man who let it slip away. Both of them are victims of their father's legacies, bound by a contract neither really wanted. But as they step into this hollow marriage, keep listening, because sometimes shared loneliness is the only soil where unexpected love can grow." "Do you understand now, Evelyn?" I understood. "Then, why did no one in his family oppose the marriage?" "There was no family to oppose. Louis was completely alone, with no parents to guide him, no siblings to share the burden, no close relatives who cared who he chose to marry. This made everything easier for my father. There were no in-laws to impress, no brothers-in-law to negotiate with, just a lonely and desperate man who would accept any deal." "And Catherine's family?" I asked, referring to his first wife. Louis tensed. "They blame me for her death. They think I didn't take good care of her, that I should have taken her to better doctors. They cut ties with me after the funeral. They won't come to the wedding and will probably never speak to me again. There was deep hurt in those words, a loneliness that went beyond finances. During the 2 weeks before the wedding, I visited the chateau several times, always accompanied by my mother or the governess, always keeping an appropriate distance from Louis. Madame Dubois, the governess, showed me the whole house, the 23 rooms, the library with thousands of ancient books, the ballrooms where Louis's ancestors threw grandiose parties, the enormous kitchen where staff worked to keep everything impeccable. She also showed me the portraits of his parents. The father was a serious man, with a large mustache and severe look, wearing a military uniform full of medals. The mother was a delicate woman, of fragile beauty, with sad eyes that seemed to predict her own fate. They were good people, said Madame Dubois, her voice softening for the first time, but they lived in the past. They couldn't accept that the world had changed. The wedding preparations began in earnest. Stylists arrived from Paris with dresses for me to try on at the hotel, florists with decoration proposals for the chapel, musicians to choose the songs that would play at the ceremony. Everything was decided by other people. I just showed up, agreed, pretended to have an opinion on things that didn't matter to me. The dress was beautiful, of delicate French lace, but when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me. My father arrived 3 days before the wedding, bringing my brothers. He was radiant, handing out Cuban cigars to everyone, conversing in basic English with the French aristocrats Louis had invited. They stayed at the same hotel as me and my mother, occupying half the available rooms. My father insisted on dining with Louis one night to get to know his son-in-law better, and returned satisfied, saying the Frenchman understood business better than he appeared. The night before the wedding, my father called me to talk in his room. "Tomorrow is the big day," he said, pouring French champagne into 2 glasses. "You are going to become a countess. You will enter European nobility. Do you know what this means for our family?" I drank the champagne in silence, letting him continue. "It means we stop being just rich. Now we have legitimacy, history, tradition. Your children will be born with a title of nobility. That is more valuable than all the gold I smuggled." The wedding took place on a sunny March afternoon, rare for that time of year in France. The chapel was decorated with white flowers, candles lit in every corner, and the pews were full of guests. On the left side, Louis's friends and relatives, uncles with severe expressions, aunts too elegant to show emotion, cousins who shook my hand with quick smiles and measured words in polite French, all curious, but contained, as if watching a deal, not a wedding. On the right side, my American family, a bit out of place, but trying to maintain composure. The presence of Louis's family was correct, polite, almost protocolar. They greeted, did what etiquette demanded. But there was no affection there, only tradition being fulfilled. I walked to the altar, holding my father's arm, wearing the lace dress that weighed more than I expected. Louis waited for me before the priest, wearing an impeccable dark suit, his face serious but gentle. When it came time for vows, he held my hand carefully, as if I were made of glass, and repeated the words in perfect French with a firm voice. I repeated too, my voice coming out weaker than I would like. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Louis leaned in and kissed my forehead, not my lips. A paternal, respectful gesture, which made it clear to everyone present that this was a deal, not passion. I heard my mother sniffle emotionally in the pews, saw my father smile satisfied, but I felt completely empty, as if I were watching someone else's life. The reception was in the chateau gardens, with long tables covered by white cloths, elaborate French food I could barely eat, and champagne flowing endlessly. Guests circulated, greeted, made toasts. I heard fragments of conversations. "She is very young, but she is pretty. They say her family is very rich. He really needed that money. Pity his parents didn't live to see this. It would be perfect if she wasn't black," I heard, but could do nothing. So I smiled, thanked the greetings, danced the opening waltz with Louis, all on autopilot. When the night ended and the guests finally left, Louis accompanied me to the main bedroom of the chateau, now officially ours. But when we entered, he simply kissed my hand and said, "You must be tired. I'll sleep in the room next door tonight. There is no rush for anything," and left me alone in the enormous room, still wearing the wedding dress, looking at the wedding ring on my finger shining under the moonlight. That night, sitting before the chateau window, looking at the French gardens bathed in silver light, I realized my life had changed completely. I was no longer Evelyn Robinson, the daughter of the American bootlegger. I was Countess Evelyn of Beaumont, wife of a French aristocrat, orphaned and lonely, future mother of noble heirs, who might be the only real family Louis would have. But then I thought, what if he doesn't touch me? How would we have children? What do you mean leaving me alone on our first night? I couldn't even take off that dress. I twisted all over and couldn't. Exhausted, I slept in it. When the sun arrived the next day, entering through the enormous windows, I woke up still wearing the crumpled wedding dress. My back ached, my neck was stiff, and I had red marks on my arms where the fabric had pressed during the night. I got up with difficulty, trying to reach the buttons on the back one more time, when I heard discreet knocks on the door. "Madame la Comtesse," called Madame Dubois' voice from the other side. It took me a second to realize she was talking to me. Madame la Comtesse. That was my title. "Come in," I replied, my voice coming out hoarse from sleep and fatigue. The governess entered carrying a tray with coffee, fresh bread, and fruit. When she saw me still dressed in the wedding outfit, her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she recovered her professional composure. "Allow me to help you, madame," she said, placing the tray on a small table and coming towards me. With experienced fingers, she began to unbutton the endless row of tiny buttons on the back of the dress. "These French wedding dresses are torture," she commented in a softer tone than usual. "They were made thinking there would always be someone to help take them off." When I finally got rid of the dress, I felt immense relief. Madame Dubois helped me put on a silk robe hanging in the closet and guided me to the small table where coffee waited. "Monsieur le Comte had coffee early and went out riding," she informed, tidying the room as she spoke. "He said he would return for lunch." There was something in her voice, a kindness that wasn't there before, as if she had understood something about my situation. I ate breakfast in silence, looking out the window at the gardens that were now officially mine too. All that, the chateau, the land, the staff, even the horses in the stables, now was part of my life. But I felt like an intruder, like someone who had entered someone else's house without permission. After breakfast, Madame Dubois took me to better get to know the quarters I would share with Louis. Besides the master bedroom, where I spent the night, there was an enormous closet full of clothes my father had ordered made for me in Paris. Dresses, shoes, coats, everything the best money could buy. I chose one of them and put it on. There was also a marble bathroom with an antique bronze-footed tub and a small private salon with sofas and a bookshelf where I could spend time. "The former Countess's quarters," explained Madame Dubois, referring to Catherine, Louis's first wife. "Monsieur le Comte ordered everything renovated before you arrived. He changed the curtains, the furniture, even the paintings on the walls. He said he didn't want you to feel like you were living in someone else's shadow." That touched me unexpectedly. Louis, even not loving me, was trying to make things less difficult. I spent the morning exploring the chateau with more freedom. Now that I was officially the lady of the house, I met the rest of the staff. The cook, Madame Laurent, a robust woman with rosy cheeks, who smiled genuinely when she saw me. The gardeners, two elderly brothers who worked there since Louis's parents were alive. The young chambermaid Marie, a girl of about 16 with frightened eyes who curtsied at every word I said. Everyone was polite, respectful, but I sensed the curiosity behind the controlled expressions. They wanted to know who this American woman was who had married the Count. They wanted to understand if I would be a kind or difficult mistress. They wanted to discover if the marriage was real or just business, as everyone whispered. Louis returned at lunchtime, still wearing riding clothes, his face flushed from exercise. When he saw me waiting for him in the dining room, he seemed momentarily surprised, as if he had forgotten another person lived there now. "Evelyn," he said, and there was genuine kindness in his voice. "Did you sleep well?" I wanted to say no, that I had spent the whole night trapped in a wedding dress, alone and confused, but I just smiled politely. "Yes, thank you," I murmured, lowering my eyes to my plate. But everything was not fine. It turns out that this repeated itself for over a month. Every night, Louis bid me good night with a chaste kiss on the forehead and went to sleep in the room next door. Every morning I woke up alone in that huge bed, hearing his footsteps already distant down the corridor, always fleeing before I woke up. Everyone in the house knew. I saw it in Madame Dubois' looks when she changed the impeccable sheets of my bed, sheets that showed no sign whatsoever that this was a bed of newlyweds. I saw it in the whispers that stopped abruptly when I entered the kitchen. I saw it in the way Marie, the young chambermaid, looked at me with poorly disguised pity. I was ashamed, a shame that burned more than any physical pain could burn. I thought he didn't like me, that he felt no attraction because I was black, because I had seen the portrait of his deceased wife. Catherine was in an oil painting in the library, wearing a light pink dress, a gentle smile on her lips. She was beautiful, white as snow, black hair falling in perfect curls, light eyes that looked like crystals, delicate, fragile, ethereal, everything I wasn't. I looked in the mirror and saw my dark skin, my African features, my young body, but different, so different from the ghost Louis still loved. I felt like the worst of women. He ignored me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the chateau, something he had to accept, but didn't necessarily want. I greeted him every day at lunch. We talked about the weather, about the horses, about empty and unimportant subjects. We dined in awkward silence, and every night he repeated the same ritual. Kiss on the forehead, good night, Evelyn. Door closing behind him. After 3 weeks, I started having nightmares. I dreamed I was trapped in that chateau forever, aging alone, a virgin countess in a ghost marriage. I dreamed my father found out and came looking for explanations, that the deal was undone, that I returned to the States in disgrace. I woke up in the middle of the night sweating, heart racing, the sensation of suffocation crushing me. One morning, after yet another night alone, yet another breakfast in awkward silence, I broke. Madame Dubois had just left the room after making the untouched bed, and I collapsed. I sat on the floor, leaning against the huge bed and cried. I cried for everything, for the life I lost, for the choice I never had, for the husband who rejected me every night, for the loneliness consuming me. I cried until I had no more tears, until my throat hurt, until my whole body shook with exhaustion. That was how Marie found me. The young chambermaid entered to get the dirty towels and saw me there undone on the floor, eyes swollen and red. She hesitated clearly, not knowing what to do, but then knelt beside me. "Madame," she whispered with a strong French accent, "can I get something for you? Tea? Water? Why doesn't he want me?" I asked, voice coming out broken, desperate. The question escaped before I could control it. Marie was silent for a moment, then sighed. "It's not about you, madame," she said, looking at the door, making sure no one was listening, and continued in a low voice. "Monsieur le Comte loved the first countess very much. When she died, something in him died too. He is afraid. Afraid of betraying her memory, afraid of feeling something again and losing again." Her words should have consoled me, but they only made the pain worse, because it meant I was competing with a ghost, with an idealized memory of a dead woman whom Louis had turned into a saint, unattainable. How could I compete with that? I was alive, imperfect, too real, too different, and he preferred the ghost. That night, when Louis came to give me the usual goodnight kiss, I couldn't take it anymore. When he leaned in to kiss my forehead, I held his face with both hands, forcing him to look me in the eyes. "No," I said, voice firm despite my racing heart. "You won't ignore me one more night. You won't run away one more time." Louis seemed shocked, frozen in place. "Evelyn, I am not." "Yes, you are," I interrupted, feeling the anger finally surfacing, replacing the shame and pain. "You are ignoring me. You are rejecting me every night for over a month. Everyone in this house knows. Everyone looks at me with pity, as if I were too pathetic, too ugly, too undesirable for the noble French count." "It's not that," he protested, but I saw the guilt in his eyes. "Then what is it?" I demanded, letting go of his face and getting up from the bed. "It's because I'm black, isn't it? Because I'm not white and delicate like Catherine? Because I'm not the ghost you still love?" I saw him recoil as if I had hit him. "Don't dare speak of her," he said in a low, dangerous voice. "Why not?" I challenged, feeling something breaking inside me. "She is here between us every night. You look at me and see how much I am not her, how much I will never be her. But guess what, Louis? I don't want to be her. I want to be seen. I want to be treated like a wife, not an intruder in a sanctuary dedicated to a dead woman." The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Louis looked at me with an expression mixing pain, anger, and something else. "Maybe recognition? You are right," he said finally, voice coming out tired. "I have been a coward. I have been cruel, unintentionally. But it is not about your color, Evelyn. It never was. It is about my inability to move on, to let the past die." He sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped. "Catherine died in my arms. Tuberculosis took months. I watched her waste away, lose weight, cough, blood, suffer, and I couldn't do anything. When it finally ended, I swore to myself I would never get close to anyone like that again, never love again, because loving means being able to lose, and I can't bear losing again. His words hit me unexpectedly. Part of me was still angry, but another part began to understand. Then why did you marry me? I asked more softly. Because I had no choice, he admitted with brutal honesty. Just like you, but you deserve more than a cowardly husband who hides behind ghosts. You deserve to have a real life, not an existence suspended in limbo. He looked at me and for the first time in over a month, really saw me. Not as a substitute for the dead wife, not as an obligation, but as a person. Give me a chance, he asked, voice breaking. I will try. I will really try this time. But I need you to be patient with me. I need you to understand that I don't know how to do this without feeling I am betraying her memory. I could have said no. I could have kept the anger, built walls even higher, but I saw the real pain in his eyes, the internal struggle, and recognized something familiar. We were both trapped. Him in grief impossible to overcome. Me in a life I didn't choose. Maybe together we could find some form of freedom. Okay, I said finally, but no more running away. No more leaving me alone every night, as if I were a contagious disease. If we are going to do this, let's do it for real. Louis nodded slowly, and then, for the first time since the wedding, he stayed. Just slept beside me. It was already a start. At the next lunch, I said, Louis, can we speak honestly? He seemed surprised, but nodded. Of course. I took a deep breath. I know the deal you made with my father. It includes grandchildren with a title of nobility. If you don't touch me, how is that going to happen? I saw him blush slightly, uncomfortable with the frankness. I know, and it will happen, but it doesn't need to be now. It doesn't need to be forced. You are still young. I still don't feel comfortable, he said, turning his head away. And what if you never feel comfortable? I asked, voice coming out harder than I intended. Will you let me grow old in this chateau, waiting for something that will never happen? Are we going to pretend to be married for the rest of our lives? Louis put the napkin on the table, the discomfort evident. That's not what I want, but I also don't want to feel forced. We were already forced to marry, at least this we can control. There was logic in what he said, but there was also a problem. I was too frustrated, too ashamed. So, in my thoughts, I decided I wouldn't speak anymore, wouldn't insist on the subject. I wanted to see how long he would do that to me. The rest of the day dragged on as if every minute had been stretched by the weight of the silence between us. We slept together now, but he didn't dare bring even his back close to me. The following weeks were even worse. Identical days, long nights, and always that distance that seemed to grow with every breath. There is nothing louder than the silence between two people lying in the same bed, separated by a ghost. Evelyn is drowning in patience, waiting for a thaw that seems impossible. But destiny has a way of forcing our hand when we are too scared to move. A simple message from America is about to arrive, and it will demand the one thing Louis is terrified to give. A future until, one random afternoon, a telegram arrived from America. It was from my parents. They wanted to know if I was well, if I was already pregnant. The question hit me like a punch in the stomach, but I didn't let my face betray what I felt. Louis read the telegram and stood still, not knowing what to say. The embarrassment between us was almost palpable, as if the paper had the power to reveal all the secrets we hid. We stood there in silence until he spoke. Lo, what are we going to answer? I looked at him, feeling my face burn, but answered firmly, what they want to hear. And that was how together we wrote a polite lie, that we were happy, that we were trying to have children, that everything was fine. We both signed, accomplices in a farce we didn't want, but that was necessary. When we sent the telegram, I felt a knot in my stomach. It was the first time we lied together, and that made me strangely closer to him. Despite everything, Louis also seemed lighter, as if the act of lying with my consent proved I was truly on his side, even though he knew I thought differently. The following weeks were strange. Now, besides the tension of the marriage without intimacy, there was also the weight of the shared secret. Every time we looked at each other, we remembered the telegram, the lie we told my parents. It was in this climate of secrecy and tension that Louis asked me to go horse riding. We went to the stables, where he kept 5 magnificent horses, all thoroughbreds, descendants of ancient lineages. I mounted one of them, a white mare named Celeste, and we rode through the fields around the chateau. He treated me like a friend, talked about everything and nothing at the same time. "You ride very well," commented Louis, riding beside me. "Better than most French women I know." "I grew up on a ranch," I replied, allowing a small smile. "I learned to ride before I learned to read." He smiled back and, for a moment, there was a real connection between us, something beyond the commercial agreement that united us. We continued riding in silence through the fields surrounding the chateau. The French landscape was different from Missouri. Everything greener, more delicate, with those soft tones that looked like oil paintings. The afternoon sun began to descend, dyeing the sky orange and pink. Celeste trotted gently, responding to my commands with ease. And, for the first time in months, I felt something resembling freedom. Louis guided his horse, a black stallion named Noir, up a narrow trail that led to a higher part of the property. We went up among ancient trees, the horse's hooves making a soft noise against the beaten earth. When we reached the top, he stopped and dismounted, tying Noir to a trunk. I did the same with Celeste, and walked to where Louis stood, looking at the view stretching before us. From up there, we could see the whole valley, the chateau in the center, surrounded by gardens organized in geometric patterns, the small villages scattered in the distance, the cultivated fields forming a mosaic of greens and golds. "This has always been my favorite place," said Louis, voice softer than normal. "I come here when I need to think, when the weight of things gets too heavy." I approached him, standing side by side, our arms almost touching. "I understand why," I replied. "It's like being above everything, where nothing can reach you." He looked at me sideways, and there was something different in that look, a vulnerability he rarely showed. "Do you feel that too? As if you were trying to escape something?" "Always," I admitted. "Since I arrived here, I feel like I'm trying to breathe underwater. Everything is beautiful. Everything is perfect on the surface, but I drown a little more every day." The words came out before I could censor them, raw and too true. Louis was silent for a long moment. "I feel that way too," he said finally. "But it's not because of you. You need to know that." I turned to look at him head on. "Then why do you treat me as if I were just another obligation? Another burden you have to carry?" He looked away, jaw tensing. "Because I'm afraid," he admitted, voice low. "Afraid that if I let you in for real, if I allow myself to feel something, I will lose you too. And I don't know if I would survive that again." "So you prefer to feel nothing?" I asked, feeling the frustration returning. "Prefer to live like this, in this safe distance, where nothing touches you, but also nothing warms you?" Louis finally looked at me, and I saw the battle waging in his eyes. "I don't know how to do it differently, Evelyn. I spent 5 years building walls. I don't know how to tear them down now." Something in me broke at that moment. Maybe it was the view from that high place. Maybe it was the way the setting sun illuminated his face, making his features softer, more human. Or maybe it was just months of frustration finally finding an outlet. I took a step toward him, closing the distance between us. "What if I help you tear down those walls?" I asked, my voice coming out lower, almost a whisper. Louis held his breath, eyes widening slightly. "Evelyn, what are you?" I didn't let him finish. I raised my hand to his face, touching his cheek carefully, as if he were made of glass. He didn't pull away, but he didn't move closer either. He was frozen in place, like a frightened animal, ready to flee. "I won't hurt you," I said softly. "I won't die and leave you alone. I am here. I am real. I am alive." My words seemed to break something in him. I saw when his eyes went down to my lips. I saw when his breathing became irregular. I saw the exact moment his resistance began to waver. He raised his hand slowly, hesitant, and touched my face too, his rough fingers against my skin, trembling, but present. "You are so young," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "So full of life. I am just a shadow of what I used to be." "Then let me bring you back to the light," I replied, moving even closer until our bodies almost touched. I could feel his heat radiating. For a moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. I saw when he leaned slightly in my direction. I saw when his eyes closed for a fraction of a second. But then, abruptly, he pulled away, dropping my face and taking steps back, as if I burned. "No," he said, voice hoarse and broken. "I can't. Sorry, Evelyn. I simply can't. The rejection hurt more than anything physical could hurt. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of him. "Okay," I said, voice coming out firmer than I expected. "I understand. I'll stop insisting. I'll stop humiliating myself, trying to make you see me as a woman." I turned my back to him, walking back to Celeste. "Let's go back. It's getting late." "Evelyn, wait." "No," I interrupted, untying Celeste and mounting with quick, precise movements. "You made clear what you feel, or rather, what you don't feel. I won't bother you anymore." Without waiting for an answer, I nudged Celeste with my heels, and the mare shot down the trail, descending the hill at a fast gallop. The wind whipped my face, drying the tears that had finally escaped, and I let the mare run. I let the speed wash away some of the pain and humiliation. When I arrived at the chateau, I dismounted quickly and handed Celeste to one of the stable hands. I ran up to my room, past Madame Dubois without saying a word, and locked the door behind me. Only then did I allow the crying to come. Not the delicate and contained crying of a lady, but violent sobs that shook my whole body, that made me double over in pain. How long would I endure that? How long would I live in that golden prison, married to a ghost, being rejected every night by a man who preferred memories to reality? Anger began to replace sadness. Anger at my father for forcing me into this. Anger at Louis for being such a coward. Anger at myself for continuing to try, for still hoping something would change. That whole theater had lasted months. Hours later, when the sun had already set completely and the chateau was plunged into darkness, I heard knocks on the door. "Evelyn." It was Louis. His voice sounded tense, worried. "Please, let me in. We need to talk." "Go away," I replied, voice hoarse from crying so much. "There is nothing more to talk about. Go sleep in the other room. Please," he insisted. "I made a mistake. Let me explain." Part of me wanted to open the door. I wanted to hear what he had to say. But the bigger part, the wounded and tired part, just wanted him to disappear. "I'm tired, Louis. I'm going to sleep." The silence on the other side was long, heavy. Finally, I heard his footsteps moving away down the corridor, every step sounding like a small defeat. I lay on the bed, still dressed, and looked at the ornamented ceiling. That beautiful French chateau ceiling, which should have been my dream come true, but was just a constant reminder of my prison. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't insist anymore. I wouldn't humiliate myself anymore. I would be the polite and distant wife, fulfill my social role, manage the house, appear at necessary events, but I wouldn't open my heart to Louis anymore. He had made it clear he didn't want what I offered. So I would stop offering, simple as that. The following days were of cold silence. Louis tried to talk to me a few times, but I answered with icy politeness, only the necessary. I saw the confusion in his eyes, but I didn't care anymore. I was tired of trying, tired of being rejected, tired of living in that farce. 1 week after that day on the hill, I woke up with Madame Dubois knocking on the door earlier than usual. "Madame la Comtesse," she said with a strange smile on her lips. "You need to get dressed. Visitors are arriving." I frowned. "Visitors? Who?" She smiled even more. "Your family, madame. They came from America to visit you." My heart raced. Family. I ran down the stairs, still in my robe, and ran into my father, my mother, and 2 of my brothers, James and Robert, standing in the entrance hall of the chateau, surrounded by suitcases and wrapped gifts. My father opened his arms when he saw me. "Evelyn, my daughter." I ran to him, hugging him tightly, feeling tears burn my eyes. My mother hugged me next, kissing my face repeatedly. "You look beautiful, daughter. Thinner, but beautiful." "What are you doing here?" I asked, still in shock. My father laughed loudly. "What do you mean? What are we doing here? It's your birthday, Evelyn. Did you think we were going to miss our daughter's party turning 18? Birthday. I had completely forgotten. It was true. In 2 days, I would turn 18. With everything happening, the date had been lost in the fog of identical days and lonely nights. Louis appeared at the top of the stairs, still wearing sleep clothes, hair messy. He looked at the scene. My family, the suitcases, the gifts, with an expression of surprise and something resembling panic. "Mr. Robinson," he said, descending the stairs quickly and extending his hand to my father. "What a good surprise. We didn't know you were coming." "It was on purpose," said my father, squeezing Louis's hand tightly. "We wanted to surprise our girl, and since we are here, Let's throw a party worthy of a French countess." He looked around the chateau with approval. "This place is perfect for receiving guests. We can use the gardens, the main hall. I'll hire musicians, cooks. It will be an unforgettable party." I saw Louis gulp. He looked at me seeking help, but I looked away. "Let him deal with my father alone." "Of course, Mr. Robinson," said Louis, with forced politeness. "We will be honored to host the party here." My father slapped his back, too excited to notice the discomfort. "Great. Let's invite the local elite, the aristocrats, you know. It will be a great demonstration of the union between our families." Louis cleared his throat, gaze fleeing to the windows. "Mr. Robinson, it's just that it's very last minute. Here in France, invitations for this type of event are usually sent at least a month in advance. I don't know if—" My father narrowed his eyes, the smile diminishing a little. "And for what reason didn't you do that?" he asked in a tone that seemed light, but came sharp as a knife. I saw Louis's face blush instantly. He became totally disconcerted, fiddling with his shirt cuffs, as if looking for an exit there. I didn't want to bother asking for money," he murmured in dragging French, mixed with English. "I thought of doing something simple, just for us. Nothing too big." My father laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. "Bother?" repeated Louis. "You are my son-in-law. Did you really think I would mind paying for a party for my only daughter?" Louis didn't answer, just lowered his head ashamed. I knew that silence well. It wasn't just shame. It was lack of money. It was the naked reality behind the pretty title. We had a pleasant day, but underneath it was tight. When we were alone, Mom dropped the smile and came with the other type of care, the one that pokes where it hurts. She asked if my period came regularly, if the cycle was regular, if I had already felt any change in my body. It wasn't a mother's curiosity. It was a checklist of someone who wants to know why the grandchild hasn't arrived yet. She said my father kept commenting that the grandchildren were taking too long, that a childless marriage doesn't sustain itself for very long, especially with so much money involved. She said this fiddling with the hem of my dress, as if it were any random comment, but every word weighed. I answered the minimum. "It comes every month. Everything is normal. There is nothing wrong with me." Inside, the urge was to say, "The problem isn't mine," but I shut up. I let her continue thinking the delay of grandchildren was just God's will. When everyone went to sleep, the house fell into a strange, heavy silence. My parents stayed in one of the guest rooms, my brothers and others, and finally we went up together, me and Louis, side by side, without touching each other. When we closed the door, the silence seemed even greater. I lay in bed, back to him, looking into the dark. He stood for a while in the middle of the room, as if he didn't know where to put his body. Then he approached slowly. "Evelyn, forgive me," he said, in a thread of a voice. "I didn't have money to throw the party you deserve." I let out a short laugh, without humor. "Ah, don't start with that?" I replied without looking at him. "We haven't even reached that point yet." He frowned. "What point?" I turned my face, stared at him. He had the bedside lamp on his side lit. "The point where you admit the obvious, that one only has to look from afar to see you didn't even know it was my birthday." He opened his mouth to deny, but the sentence died halfway. I continued cuttingly. "Spare me, Louis. Don't even try. I saw your face down there when my father spoke. 18 years. You looked like someone hearing the date for the first time." Silence. He swallowed hard. His hands went to his pockets, gesture of a man who wants to hide. He took a deep breath, face half in shadow, half in light, and confessed. "You are right. I didn't know," he said. "Finally. I didn't know it was your birthday. Your father spoke down there, and I found out at that moment." The words hit dry. I already knew, actually I suspected, but hearing it hurt in another way. That's when the tears came. Not those pretty movie tears. They came brute, heavy, hot, burning my face. I hated that, crying in front of someone, and I hated even more crying in front of him. I felt the mattress sink. Louis approached slowly, as if getting close to a wounded animal that could bite at any moment. "Evelyn," he said, and not knowing what to do, put his arm around me in an awkward hug. It was the first time in our married life he hugged me for real, and I didn't want it. I pushed his arm away with force. I couldn't speak between sobs. "Don't do that now." "No." He retreated immediately. He sat on the edge of the bed, without touching me, without saying anything else. I turned my back, curled up, hugging my own body, as if it were the only thing that was still mine. I cried until fatigue won. At some point, between one sob and another, I slept from exhaustion. When I woke up at dawn, the bed still had a huge space between us. Louis was lying on the opposite edge, almost falling, motionless, as if afraid to touch me even while sleeping. That night I learned two things: that he really didn't have the money my father imagined, and that he didn't truly care about me. It wasn't just my impression. The morning of my birthday dawned with an impeccable blue sky, one of those that seemed to have been ordered especially for the occasion. But I woke up with a weight in my chest that not even all that light could dissipate. 18 years. It should be a milestone, a grandiose celebration, and it would be, only not for the right reasons. Madame Dubois, followed by Marie carrying a new dress my mother had brought from America. It was beautiful, navy blue silk, with delicate embroidery, discreet neckline, marked waist, the type of dress a French countess should wear at her birthday party. Madame la Comtesse, said Madame Dubois with a genuine smile. Happy birthday. The house is in an uproar with preparations. I smiled back, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. Louis had already left. I heard his footsteps in the hallway before the sun even rose. Always fleeing, always distant, always leaving me alone in that enormous bed that should be ours, but was only mine. I went down to have breakfast with the family, looking out the window at the gardens where staff ran from one side to the other, preparing tables, hanging decorations, organizing chairs. My father had hired a whole team from Paris in the last 48 hours. Musicians, florists, cooks. He was determined to make this party an event that would mark local society, even if the French aristocrats had been notified at the last minute. The problem is I didn't want any of that. I didn't want a party, didn't want to pretend happiness, didn't want to smile at strangers while my marriage crumbled in silence. But I had no choice. I never did. The afternoon arrived too quickly. The main hall of the chateau was transformed. White and gold flowers in every corner, candles lit, even with the sun still high, tables covered by impeccable linen cloths, crystals shining under the light entering through the enormous windows. There was French champagne, imported sweets, and a dinner table that would easily seat 50 people. Only there weren't 50 people. Louis had managed to gather about 20 guests, some local aristocrats who accepted the last-minute invitation out of curiosity or politeness, two couples of friends he knew from Paris, the village priest, and some staff closer to the chateau. My father tried to disguise the disappointment, but I saw it in his eyes. That wasn't the party he had imagined. There were no important politicians, no members of Parisian high society, no demonstration of power and influence he wanted so much. I descended the stairs wearing the navy blue dress, hair tied in an elegant bun that Marie had done using the jewelry my mother had brought. Pearl necklace, diamond earrings. I looked like a real countess. On the outside, at least. Louis waited for me at the foot of the stairs, wearing the impeccable dark suit, hair combed back, the upright posture of someone born in an aristocratic cradle. When he saw me descending, something passed through his eyes. Admiration, perhaps, or just the recognition that I was fulfilling my role nicely, being the decorative wife he needed for that night. "You look beautiful," he said in French, extending his hand to help me down the last steps. "Thank you," I replied, accepting his hand, but avoiding his gaze. My voice came out colder than intended, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to fake warmth anymore, where there was only ice. My father approached, eyes scanning the room with that expression I knew well. He was making calculations, evaluating losses, measuring disappointments. But when he looked at me, he forced a wide smile. "My princess," he said too loudly, hugging me tightly. 18 years. The most beautiful woman at this party. Then he turned to Louis, the smile diminishing a little. "Where are the other guests?" I thought more people were coming. Louis maintained composure, but I saw the tension in his jaw. As I explained, "Mr. Robinson, the notice was very last minute. Many families already had commitments, but those who came are important people, influential in the region." My father looked around again. The 20 guests conversed in small groups, sipping champagne, clearly curious about the American family that had bought entry into French aristocracy through that marriage. They weren't exactly the elite he hoped to impress. "All right," said my father, disappointment poorly disguised. "Let's enjoy then." It is painful to watch, isn't it? A father measuring his success by the guest list, while his daughter measures her worth by her husband's indifference. The room is filled with expensive champagne and fresh flowers, yet it feels completely airless. But don't be fooled by the polite smiles and the stiff upper lips. The pressure in this room is rising, and tonight, the perfect facade is going to crack in a way none of them, especially Louis, ever saw coming. He slapped Louis's back with unnecessary force and went to greet the guests, my brothers, James and Robert, following him like silent shadows. Louis sighed softly beside me. "He is disappointed," he murmured. "And do you care?" I asked without looking at him. He didn't answer, just held my arm with formal politeness and guided me to the center of the room, where guests were starting to gather. It was time to start the theater. The next few hours were refined torture. I smiled until my cheek hurt. I thanked greetings in French. I talked about the weather, about the chateau gardens, about how I was loving life in France. I lied. Louis remained by my side the whole time, playing the role of attentive husband with rehearsed perfection. He held my hand when necessary, put his hand on my back, guiding me among guests, smiled when someone commented on the beautiful couple, and I pretended that was real, that those touches meant something beyond social obligation. But every touch was a lie, every smile of his a falsity, every gentle word a memorized script. Dinner was served at 8 p.m. Elaborate dishes a Parisian chef had prepared, expensive wines my father had insisted on bringing from America, French desserts too delicate for my taste. I sat at the head of the table next to Louis, my father at the other end, my mother beside him. The guests filled the space between us, and conversation flowed in polite French, punctuated by occasional laughter. I could barely eat. Every forkful seemed to weigh tons. Every sip of wine went down with difficulty. Louis noticed. I saw when his eyes went down to my almost untouched plate. I saw the fleeting worry pass over his face before he recomposed himself and went back to talking to the guest next to him. I didn't care that he noticed. I didn't care about anything in that moment, except surviving that night without collapsing in front of everyone. Because my desire was to retreat and cry a lot, with no time to stop. When dinner finally ended, the musicians my father had hired began playing in the corner of the room. Classical French music, elegant and melancholic. Some guests got up to dance, and my father, always performative, came to me. "Come dance with your father, princess," he said, extending his hand. I accepted, allowing him to guide me to the center of the room. We danced a slow waltz, and he held me like when I was a child, at those parties at the ranch in Missouri, where everything seemed simpler, where I didn't yet know the real price of his money. "Are you sad?" he said softly, too close to my ear. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "I'm fine, Dad." I lied, keeping the fixed smile on my face. "No, you're not." He spun me gently, dark eyes studying me with attention. "Is it him? Is Louis treating you badly?" "No, Dad. He is gentle." The word came out bitter because it was true. Louis was gentle, polite, respectful, everything except what I really wanted. Present, interested, in love. Then, what is the problem? I couldn't answer. I couldn't say I was in love with a man who saw me as an obligation, who slept beside me but never touched me, who fulfilled the husband role in front of others but disappeared when we were alone. I couldn't admit that out loud, especially to my father, who had orchestrated that marriage expecting heirs to call grandchildren. "I'm just tired," I said finally. "It was a long day." He nodded, but didn't seem convinced. When the music ended, he returned me to Louis with a look that made it clear. "Take care, or you'll have a problem with me." Louis took me back with that formal touch on the waist, and we began dancing the next song. I looked anywhere except at him, at the guests, at the decorations, at the candles starting to melt. "Evelyn," he said softly, voice charged with something I couldn't identify. "Look at me." I didn't want to. I didn't want to see those brown eyes full of distant kindness. I didn't want to see the handsome face I had started to love, but would never really be mine. "Evelyn," he insisted, hand on my back, pulling me a little closer. "Please." Finally I gave in, raising my eyes to meet his. And what I saw caught me off guard. It wasn't indifference. There was something there, something that looked like pain mixed with confusion, as if he were also fighting some internal battle I couldn't understand. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, voice too low for others to hear. "For everything. For not being the husband you deserve, for being a coward, for everything." The words hit me unexpectedly, and I felt tears burning my eyes. I blinked fast, pushing them back. I wasn't going to cry there in front of everyone. "Louis," I started, but didn't know what to say. What was left to say that hadn't already been said? He seemed to realize my struggle, and something changed in his expression. Without warning, without preparation, he leaned in and pressed his lips against mine. It was fast, a chaste peck, almost fraternal, lasting a few seconds. But it was our first kiss on the mouth, the first since we had married months ago, and it happened there, in the middle of the room, under the curious gaze of 20 strangers. My parents, my brothers, everyone. When he pulled away, I stood paralyzed, not knowing how to react. My face burned, heart beat irregularly, and I couldn't process what had just happened. Was it real? Was it just for the audience? Did it mean anything, or was it just another performance? The guests applauded politely, some smiling, others commenting in soft French about what a lovely couple and how in love they are. My father nodded in approval, satisfied that his investment was finally seemingly bearing fruit. My mother smiled that smile of someone who thinks everything is perfectly on track, but I was floored, awkward, not knowing where to hide my face. Louis kept his arm around my waist, holding me as if he knew my legs were about to give way. I leaned on him while the music continued, while we danced mechanically, while the world spun around us and I tried to understand what the hell had just happened. He smelled so good. Whether it was theater or not, I took advantage of the situation. The party dragged on for 2 more hours. Cake was served. 3 tiers of French pastry covered in white icing and sugar flowers. They sang happy birthday in French, then in English at my father's request. I blew out the candles, made a silent wish I knew wouldn't come true, and cut the first piece beside Louis, who held my hand over the knife while photographers recorded the moment. When guests finally began to leave, thanking and saying goodbye, I felt immense relief. Every departure was a liberation. Every good night and happy birthday brought me closer to the moment I could take off that tight dress, those heavy jewels, that mask of happiness. My father was one of the last to go up to the guest room, clearly satisfied despite the smaller party than expected. "It was good," he said, kissing my forehead. "Small, but good. Louis behaved nicely, even kissed you in front of everyone." He laughed as if that were a notable achievement. "See? I told you guys you would work it out." I forced a smile. "Good night, Dad." When we were finally alone, Louis and I went up the stairs in silence. The chateau had returned to customary quietness, only the sound of our footsteps echoing through the stone corridors. We entered the room. I just wanted to take a bath. So, I simply went to the closet and started taking off the jewelry. Marie had already left a clean nightgown on the bed, but I could barely move. My hands trembled as I tried to open the pearl necklace clasp. "Let me help," said Louis behind me, voice soft. "No need," I replied sharply. He ignored me, approaching and placing his hands over mine, guiding them to the clasp. His fingers were warm, firm, and I hated how my body reacted to that minimal touch. Shivers down the spine, breath becoming irregular. When the necklace finally came loose, he placed it delicately on the dressing table. Our eyes met in the mirror, him behind me in front. "Evelyn," he began. "No," I interrupted without turning. "Today, I don't want to talk today." He was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. When you want to." Then, something inside me broke at that instant, a mixture of anger, frustration, and a desperation I couldn't even name. I don't know what got into me. Maybe it was the exhaustion of pretending the whole night, maybe it was the taste of that kiss still burning on my lips. Maybe it was simply the end of my patience. I brought my hands to my back and started unbuttoning the dress. Slowly, very slowly, still back to him, but feeling the weight of his gaze in every movement. The buttons gave way one by one, and the dress began to slide off my shoulders. I didn't look back, didn't say anything, just let the dress fall to my waist, exposing my bare back, dark skin contrasting with the blue fabric. I continued pushing the dress down until it formed a pool of silk at my feet. I stood there in my slip and then took that off too. Then the stockings, every piece removed slowly, deliberately. My heart beat irregularly, but I didn't stop. When I finally took off my panties, I stood completely naked back to him. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel his eyes on me. I could hear his breathing becoming irregular. I could feel the tension in the air like electricity about to discharge. I raised my eyes to the dressing table mirror and found his reflection. Louis was frozen in place, face flushed, eyes wide, mouth parted. He looked at me, at my breasts reflected in the mirror, at the curves of my body, at every inch of skin I had never shown before. Our eyes met in the reflection. I saw desire there, saw confusion, saw fear, but he didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there frozen like a statue, fighting with himself. I turned then, facing him head-on for the first time, completely naked, vulnerable, exposed. I let him see me for real. Not the decorative wife, not the polite countess, but me, Evelyn, the woman he had refused to touch for 8 whole months. He swallowed hard. His hands closed into fists by his side, as if forcing himself not to move. I waited. I waited for him to come to me, to touch me, to finally break that barrier separating us. I waited for that moment to be the turning point, for all that desire I saw in his eyes to turn into action. But he remained motionless. So I turned my back again and walked to the bathroom. Every step a statement, a provocation, a last desperate attempt. The tub was there empty, inviting, but filling it would take an eternity, and I had no patience to wait. I went straight to the shower. I turned on the tap, letting the hot water fall over my body, and left the bathroom door completely open. Purposely, I left the shower curtain half open too, just enough so he could see me if he wanted, if he came, if he finally had courage. I waited, washed my hair slowly, let the water run down my body, ran my hands over my arms, neck, breasts, hoping to hear his footsteps approaching, hoping to feel his hands in place of mine, hoping he would enter that bathroom and end that torture. But nothing. Absolute silence. I closed my eyes, feeling something much worse than rejection. I felt humiliation, that deep, cutting humiliation that only comes when you offer yourself completely and are ignored. Perhaps some of you listening right now have tasted that bitterness, the feeling of not being enough, or worse, of being completely invisible to the one you love. Standing there, naked and alone, she wished she could simply dissolve into the water, just so she wouldn't have to face the cruel truth in his indifferent eyes. But don't turn away, because this moment of absolute vulnerability is about to spark a change no one expected. Perhaps some of you listening right now have tasted that bitterness, the feeling of not being enough, or worse, of being completely invisible to the one you love. Standing there, naked and alone, I wished I could simply dissolve into the water, just so I wouldn't have to face the cruel truth in his indifferent eyes. I gave myself that way, naked in every sense, and he simply didn't want it. I leaned my forehead against the cold shower tiles and let the tears mix with the water. They weren't delicate tears, they were sobs shaking my whole body, making me bend under the weight of pain and shame I held back all night. I was too ugly, too black, too young, or simply wasn't Catherine. Not the ghost he continued loving more than any living woman could ever compete with. When I finally got out of the shower, I wrapped myself in the thickest towel I found and took a deep breath before opening the door. Louis was lying on the bed, back to the bathroom, so motionless that for a moment I thought he was sleeping, but the tension in his shoulders told me otherwise. He was awake, pretending to sleep, a coward to the end. I put on the nightgown Marie had left, turned off all the lights, and lay on my edge of the bed. That night, I slept feeling like the worst of women, invisible trash. The following days were the strangest of my life. My family remained at the chateau and Louis and I turned into professional actors. In the morning, we had breakfast together in the presence of my parents. During the day, we went on tourist outings around the region. We visited other chateaux, medieval villages, local wineries. Louis held my hand when we walked, put his arm around my shoulders when we posed for photographs, whispered funny comments in my ear making me smile, despite everything. For those looking from outside, we were the perfect couple, young countess and her aristocrat husband, in love and happy. My parents bought the lie entirely. My mother kept commenting how attentive Louis was, how he looked at me with such affection, how we were a real marriage, not just convenience. My father was satisfied, seeing the investment finally yield the social fruits he expected. But at night, when the bedroom door closed and we were alone, the theater ended. I didn't speak to him, didn't look at his face, changed clothes in the bathroom, lay on my back, pretended to sleep. He tried to start conversation a few times. "Evelyn, please, don't ignore me like this." I simply didn't answer, pretended he didn't exist. On the 4th day, he gave up trying. He also started lying down in silence, also started pretending to sleep, also started living in that limbo where we shared a space, but not a life. On the last night, before the family left, after dinner, I sat in the armchair near the window, pretending to read a book in French. I was observing his every movement. "Your family leaves tomorrow," said Louis, breaking the silence for the first time in days. I didn't answer. Turned the page of the book, pretending to be absorbed in reading. He sighed. "Evelyn, for God's sake, this can't go on. We can't live like this." Finally, I looked at him, and all the anger, all the pain, all the frustration of those months came to the surface. "Live how, Louis? Pretending? That's exactly what we've been doing for over a week. Pretending for my family. Pretending for the party guests. Pretending we are a real marriage when you can barely look at me when we are alone." He retreated. I know I've been terrible. But that kiss at the party wasn't just theater, Evelyn. I wanted to do that. Why? I demanded getting up from the armchair. Because my father was watching? Because you needed to keep up appearances? Because you finally remembered you have a wife you bought along with your financial salvation? Besides, that can't even be considered a kiss. Because I was terrified, he confessed, his voice cracking under the weight of a truth he had hidden for too long. The confession silenced me instantly. Louis didn't pace. He slumped onto the edge of the bed as if his legs could no longer carry the burden of his secrets. "Did you see the Duke of Clermont at the party? He looked at you with such hunger, Evelyn. And for the first time, I didn't see you as the American wife or part of a business deal. I saw a woman vibrant, alive, breathing, being wasted on a man who was already half dead inside." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I heard them whispering on the terrace. They weren't just mocking me. They were pitying you. They said, "Look at her, full of fire, tied to a corpse." And they were right. I have been a corpse, Evelyn. I've been hugging a ghost so tight that I forgot how to hold a living person. When I saw you dancing, laughing, trying so hard to be perfect for a husband who gives you nothing, something in me shattered. I realized I wasn't honoring Catherine by rejecting you. I was just punishing myself. And tonight, I realized I don't want to be punished anymore. I want to live. I want to be the man who deserves that smile. His voice came out hoarse, charged with anger and something else. And for the first time since you arrived, I really looked at you. I stopped hiding behind my grief and saw what they were seeing. A beautiful, elegant, intelligent woman who speaks 5 languages, who dances like she was born in a ballroom, who lights up any room she enters. He approached, brown eyes burning with intensity I had never seen before. I saw that I have an enviable wife, a woman half the men at that party wanted to have, and I was wasting you. I was so stuck in the past, so cowardly, that I didn't notice I had something precious right in front of me. And I felt jealous of the way they looked at you, the way they talked about you, the way they desired what was mine. He held my face with both hands, forcing me to face him. "You are my wife, Evelyn, mine." And when I saw those men coveting you, when I heard those disgusting comments, something woke up in me. A possessiveness I didn't know I had. A need to show everyone and you that you are mine, that no one else can have you. My heart beat so strongly I was sure he could hear. "Louis," he released my face and took a step back, running hands through his own hair with frustration. "And when you undressed in front of me that night, when you stood there naked, offering me everything I had been refusing for months, my God, Evelyn, you have no idea how much I wanted to go to you, how much I wanted to touch you, kiss you, make you mine for real. But I froze." He stopped, breathing heavy, hands shaking. I froze because I realized that if I crossed that line, there would be no turning back. I couldn't pretend anymore that this is just a commercial deal. I would have to admit that you mean something to me, and that terrifies me, because I am betraying. He didn't finish speaking, but the word hung in the air. "Catherine." Louis covered his face with his hands, and when he spoke again, voice came out muffled, broken. "When I made the deal with your father, I thought it would be peaceful. Yes, the deal included children. I needed heirs. Your father wants grandchildren with a title of nobility. I knew that. I accepted that. I thought it would be mechanical. Thought I could fulfill that part of the deal without getting involved emotionally. That it would be just an obligation to be fulfilled, like signing papers or attending social events." He dropped his hands and stared at me, red eyes. "I thought I could touch you without feeling anything. That I would do the necessary to get you pregnant, give you the children the agreement demanded, and then everyone would go on with their life. You would be the mother of my heirs, nothing more. I thought my heart would be protected, locked, dedicated only to Catherine's memory." He took a step in my direction, vulnerability stamped on his face. "But after the wedding, everything I had planned collapsed because I realized I can't think of making you mine mechanically, coldly, just to fulfill a contract. You aren't just a body, Evelyn. You are alive, real, present. You laugh when I tell stories, ask intelligent questions about art, ride a horse better than half the men I know. He took another step, voice breaking. He took a deep breath, trembling. And when you stood naked in front of me, when you entered that shower leaving the door open, my God, Evelyn, I wanted so much to go to you, but I knew if I went, it wouldn't be out of obligation. It would be because I want you for real. And that is admitting that Catherine isn't the only one anymore, admitting that you are already in here. He tapped his chest, where I swore no one else would enter. He couldn't continue. That was all enough. I didn't imagine any of that, not the depth of his conflict, not the internal battle between duty and feeling, not the weight of the promise he made to a dead woman that prevented him from fulfilling the agreement with my father. I was totally surprised and strangely, immensely happy, because it meant he felt something, that I wasn't alone. That went against all thoughts of rejection I thought he had towards me. His words completely disarmed me. All defenses I had built, all walls, everything collapsed, because for the first time he was being completely honest. I took a step toward him, closing the distance that had become so familiar between us. You already have me, Louis, I said softly. I am your wife. I am here. I am not going anywhere. He pulled me close and then, finally, he kissed me. It wasn't like that quick peck at the party given for the audience. This was a real husband and wife kiss, of repressed desire. His lips pressed against mine with an urgency that caught me by surprise. How delicious, my God, how delicious. We started kissing non-stop, as if we were dying of thirst, and finally found water. He held my face with both hands, kissing me deeper, more desperate, as if wanting to recover all the lost time in a single moment. My fingers went to his hair, pulling, holding, keeping him close to me. His hands descended from my face to my neck, then to shoulders, then to waist. He pulled me against him, and I felt every inch of his body pressed against mine. His hands began to explore, passed over my back, descended to the curve of my waist, went up dangerously close to my breasts. I had never been kissed like that, never been touched like that. It was overwhelming, consuming, perfect. Louis pushed me gently against the wall, his body pressing me there while continuing to kiss me with that hunger that made me dizzy. One of his hands finally went up and covered my breast over the nightgown, squeezing carefully, testing, exploring. I arched against him, wanting more, needing more. But then I heard a noise in the hallway, footsteps, probably some employee, or worse, someone from my family going somewhere. I knew it wasn't to the bathroom, since every room had its own. Reality hit me like a bucket of cold water. Louis, I said panting, pulling my mouth from his with superhuman effort. Louis, wait. He stopped immediately, breathing heavy. What is it? Did I do something wrong? No, I replied quickly, holding his face. No, it's perfect. But my parents are here. My whole family is sleeping in the guest rooms. I don't want to do this with them here. I don't want our first time to be like this, afraid someone hears, having shame. I saw disappointment pass through his eyes, but also understanding. He nodded slowly, still trying to control breathing. You are right, he said, resting his forehead on mine. Sorry, I got carried away. It's just, I've wanted to touch you like this for so long. I wanted to too, I admitted, running fingers through his hair. But let's wait just one more day. My family leaves tomorrow and then we can do it right without rush, without fear of being interrupted. Louis smiled, a genuine, beautiful smile that lit up his whole face. One day. I can wait one more day. But he didn't let go, and I didn't want him to let go. We went back to bed, and this time, when we lay together, there wasn't that abyss between us. Louis pulled me into his arms, nesting me against his chest, and went back to kissing me. We kissed for hours, like teenagers discovering love for the first time. His hands explored my body over the nightgown, tracing the curve of my waist, going up my ribs, going down my thigh. My hands explored too. His chest under the sleeping shirt defined muscles I had never touched. Wide shoulders, strong back. We made out all night. Stopped only when things threatened to go too far. We need to stop, he would say with a hoarse voice, pulling away with visible effort. I know, I replied, also panting, also frustrated. But minutes later, we were kissing again, incapable of keeping apart. It was the longest and most wonderful night of my life. Every kiss was a promise, every touch was an anticipation of what was to come. And when finally fatigue won and we fell asleep, I dreamed of the next day, when my family would finally leave and Louis would be only mine. Finally, after months of cold silence, two lonely souls found a way to heal each other. It's rare to see a business arrangement blossom into genuine passion, isn't it? But hold on to this moment of happiness, because in Evelyn's world, peace is often just the calm before a devastating storm. The next morning, we went down together to have breakfast with the family. The rest of the day dragged on torturously. Every minute seemed to last an hour. Every hour seemed an eternity. I couldn't concentrate on anything. On my mother's conversations, on the walks we took through the gardens, on the lunch Madame Laurent prepared with such care. All I could think was, when are they leaving? When will I finally be alone with Louis? He was also restless. I saw it in the looks he threw me during the day. Looks charged with promise, poorly contained desire, anticipation. When our eyes met, it was as if the rest of the world disappeared. Only we existed, and that delicious tension growing every second. In the afternoon, when my family started packing suitcases, I almost jumped for joy. Finally, Louis helped carry the suitcases to the car my father had rented. Always polite, always the perfect son-in-law. They stayed 10 days at the chateau. "Take good care of each other," said my mother, hugging me tight. "And write to me, okay? I want to know everything." Not everything, I thought, feeling my face heat up. My father hugged me last. "Are you happy?" he asked softly, only for me to hear. I looked at Louis, who was talking to my brothers near the car. He felt my gaze and turned, smiling at me. That smile that was now only mine. "I am," I replied honestly. "I am happy, Dad." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then my work here is done." When the car finally left through the chateau gate, I stood there beside Louis, waving until they disappeared completely down the road. The silence that followed was different from all others. It wasn't heavy, wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged with expectation. Louis turned to me slowly. Our eyes met, and I saw in them everything I felt. Desire, nervousness, anticipation, fear, excitement. "They left," he said, voice hoarse. "They did," I confirmed, my heart beating so strong it felt like it would leave my chest. He extended his hand. "Come." I took his hand and he guided me back inside the chateau. We went up the stairs slowly, every step increasing my anxiety. When we arrived at our room and he closed the door behind us, locking it with the key, I could barely breathe. Louis turned to me, and his look was so intense I felt my legs weaken. "Evelyn," he said, coming towards me, with slow, deliberate steps, like a predator approaching prey. "Are you sure? Because if we start this now, I won't be able to stop." I swallowed hard, gathering all the courage I had. "I'm sure. I don't want you to stop." And then he kissed me again. And this time there was no family to interrupt us. No excuses, no more waiting. It was just the two of us. Finally. I have in my head that day was one of the best of my entire long life of 78 years. The following days were constant discovery. Louis taught me everything. Every night, after dinner, we went up to the room, and he touched me, kissed me, explored me, and I explored him too, losing shyness, little by little. During the day, life continued normal. We had breakfast together, walked through the gardens, made love where no one was looking, received occasional visits from curious neighbors. But there was a new intimacy between us, looks charged with promise, discreet touches that made my whole body react, complicit smiles that said, "I know what we did last night, or what we just did." 4 weeks after that first night, I woke up nauseous. I ran to the bathroom and vomited everything I had eaten at dinner before. Louis appeared behind me, worried, holding my hair while I vomited again. "Are you sick?" he asked, voice charged with worry. I wiped my mouth and looked at him, and suddenly understood the nausea, the sensitive breasts, the sleepiness I had been feeling. "I don't think I'm sick," I said slowly. "I think I'm pregnant." His face transformed. Surprise, then pure, uncontrollable joy. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" "I'm not sure yet, but all the signs are there." He pulled me into a tight hug, laughing against my hair. "A son. We're going to have a son." And in that moment I felt genuine happiness, not for the pregnancy itself, but for what it represented. Louis was happy, not because the agreement with my father was being fulfilled, but because we were going to have a child together, because our family was growing. The pregnancy was confirmed 2 weeks later by a doctor, Louis called. I was almost a month pregnant. The months passed in a blur of anticipation. My belly swelled, marking the passage of time more accurately than any calendar. Louis was by my side for every doctor's visit, every kick, every moment of fear and joy. And then, the day finally came. I had probably gotten pregnant on the first or second night we slept together. The doctor said everything seemed fine, that I was young and healthy, that there was no reason for concern. Louis became even more attentive, didn't let me do anything he considered effort, insisted I rest, eat well, not stress, ordered the best doctors from Paris to examine me regularly. I wrote to my parents telling the news. My father's response came quickly in a telegram. Congratulations. May he come with health, expecting news of the heir's birth. The months passed slowly. My belly grew. My breasts got huge. My body changed in ways I didn't expect. Louis thought everything was beautiful, told me every day I was radiant, that he never saw me so beautiful, and continued touching me, kissing me, making love with redoubled care, as if I would break. Mason was born on a winter night, after 12 hours of labor that made me think I was going to die. The pain was unbearable, much worse than anything I had imagined. I screamed, cried, begged them to stop, but Louis was there holding my hand, saying I was strong, that I would make it. And I did. When I finally heard the baby cry, when the doctor placed that small red being in my arms, everything was worth it. I looked at that crumpled little face, those closed eyes, those tiny hands, and fell in love instantly. Louis cried for real, tears running down his face while looking at the son in my arms. He is perfect, he said with voice choked. You two are perfect. Our boy wasn't as black as me, nor as white as the father. He was in between. Light brown skin, almost no hair, features mixing both. We named him Mason, in honor of Louis's grandfather. We sent a telegram to my parents. Mason born, mother and baby well, heir guaranteed. My father's response was immediate. Congratulations. Transferring agreed bonus to Louis's account. Keep it up. Bonus. There was a bonus in the agreement for the birth of the first male child. I didn't even know. Louis had never mentioned it, but now it made sense. His joy wasn't just paternal, it was also financial. The birth of Mason guaranteed more money, more security. I tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the baby, on motherhood, on learning to breastfeed and change diapers and calm night cries. But a part of me, that part that could never completely forget the origin of our marriage, kept that information stored. There was a price for everything, even for my son. The following years were the happiest of my life. We had 3 more children. Harper, 2 years after Mason, and then the twins Caleb and Joshua, 3 years after her. The house was always full of noise, laughter, baby crying. Louis was a dedicated father, played with the children, told stories, taught Mason to ride a horse. I became a full-time mother. It wasn't what I had imagined for my life. I had studied so much, learned so much, become so refined, but it was good. It was real. For the first time I felt I had purpose, beyond being a decorative wife or tool in my father's business. We visited America once a year, always in the European summer. The children loved the ranch, loved the horses, loved the grandparents who spoiled them without limits. My brothers, all married, and with their children. The cousins loved each other. My father was starting to get old, but still commanded the empire with an iron fist. Business had expanded. Besides the ranch and the rackets, which were now more discreet, more sophisticated, he had invested in legal mining, in agribusiness, in offshore companies. You did well, Evelyn, he said in one of those visits, looking at the grandchildren playing in the garden. You continued the name. These boys will inherit everything. The title of nobility, the properties in France, and when I die, part of what I built here too. They are just children, Dad, I replied, bothered by the way he spoke of them, as if they were investments. Children grow, and when they grow, they will understand the value of what they have. They will understand that all this, he gestured to the ranch, to the mansion, was built for them, to guarantee they never go through what I and my brothers went through. I didn't argue. I knew it was useless. For my father, everything was about legacy, about guaranteeing the Robinson family continued powerful for generations. And I had fulfilled my role. I had given him grandchildren with noble blood. I had legitimized the surname through marriage to Louis. But sometimes, when looking at my children, I asked myself, What price they would pay for all this. What weight they would carry for being heirs to two fortunes, one built on stolen money and illegal bets, another on centuries of aristocratic history. Would it be a blessing or curse? In 1981, Louis needed to go to Paris to resolve financial matters. Ancient properties needed expensive repairs. There were overdue taxes, legal issues only he could resolve personally. "I'll stay only a week," he said, kissing me before getting into the car that would take him to the train station. "When I return, let's take that trip you want. Take the kids to see Italy. Promise?" I asked, smiling. "Promise." He kissed me again, this time longer. "I love you, Evelyn. I know, I love you too." He got in the car and left. I stood there waving until the car disappeared down the road. That week dragged on. I felt a tightness in my chest, an anguish that had no name, as if the air in the chateau had become thin. The children asked for their father, and I said he would return soon, that he would bring gifts, that we would go to Italy. I spoke trying to ignore the bad feeling, freezing my stomach every time the phone rang. On the 5th day, the phone rang, but it wasn't Louis. It was the French police. A metallic, cold, bureaucratic voice asked if I was the Countess of Beaumont. When I confirmed, the world stopped. "Madame, we regret to inform you, but your husband's body was found this morning in a hotel room in Pigalle." Pigalle, the red light district, the place of prostitutes, cheap cabarets, the filth Paris hides from tourists. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice coming out firm, though my legs trembled so much I needed to sit. "My husband is in Paris for meetings with lawyers and bankers. He stays at the Ritz, not in Pigalle. There is no mistake, madame. We need you to come make the identification." I left the children with Madame Dubois, who cried silently in the kitchen, and took the first train to Paris. The trip was a gray blur. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was in shock, an ice statue trying to keep posture while my inside collapsed. The morgue was a cold place, smelling of cheap disinfectant formaldehyde. When they pulled the sheet and I saw Louis's face, pale, motionless, with an expression of frozen surprise, the scream got stuck in my throat. It was him, my Louis, the man who had taught me to love, the father of my children, the only true friend I had in that strange land. But the worst wasn't death. It was the story they told me. The police inspector, a short man smelling of cigarettes impregnated in his suit, didn't even look in my eyes. Said Louis had died of a heroin overdose. Said he was in a room rented by the hour, surrounded by empty bottles and syringes, in the company of 2 women who fled before police arrived. "Overdose?" I asked, feeling anger start to boil in place of pain. My husband barely drank wine at dinner. He hated medicine. He was a family man, an aristocrat who spent days caring for horses and reading history books. "Are you lying?" The inspector shrugged, that French gesture of indifference that made me want to fly at his neck. "Madame, everyone has secrets. Bored aristocrats often seek dangerous diversions." I left there dizzy. The next day, newspapers stamped the headline that destroyed what remained of our life. "Count of Beaumont, found dead in orgy of drugs and prostitution. They killed him twice, once in the hotel and another on the newsstand." I knew it was a lie. Louis wasn't a saint, but he wasn't that. He was a melancholic man, yes, but upright. That smelled of a setup, smelled of silencing a witness, and the smell. The smell reminded me of my father's office. I called America. My father answered on the second ring. "Dad, they killed Louis." There was silence on the other end of the line, a silence too long. I heard, "My daughter, newspapers here are already reporting. A shame. Drugs. Evelyn, I didn't know he had those vices." His voice was calm, too calm. "He had no vices, Dad. You know that. This was planted. Someone did this to him." "Evelyn," said my father with that tone of someone ending a business discussion. "What is done is done. The important thing now is to protect the children and the assets. Come home." I hung up the phone with the cold certainty I would never know the truth. Had it been my father? Had Louis discovered something about money laundering he shouldn't have? Or were they enemies of my father using my husband to send a bloody message? Or maybe French loan sharks? The doubt was acid corroding my grief. They released the body 2 days later. The autopsy was done in a bureaucratic hurry, just to stamp the official lie: cardiac arrest induced by illicit substances. The wake wasn't at our chateau. Louis's distant family, those third cousins who never visited us, I only saw them at the wedding, now appeared like vultures smelling carrion. insisted it be in Paris, in an ancient and freezing church, near the Beaumont family cemetery. When I arrived at the church, holding Mason's hand so tightly my fingers went white, the coffin was already open there. I walked to it as if walking on ground glass. And when I looked inside, God, that was the worst part. They had put makeup on Louis, a thick layer of peach-colored foundation to hide the pallor of death. Lipstick on lips that were always thin and pale, looked like a wax doll, a grotesque caricature of the handsome man who slept beside me every night. The smell was nauseating, a mix of lilies, incense, and chemicals used to preserve flesh. But I needed to see, needed to be sure. I asked, with a voice accepting no refusal to be alone with him for a minute. The French cousins turned up their noses, whispered, but left. Mason stood at the door guarding like a guard dog protecting his mother. I approached the coffin and did what I needed to do. I lifted the sleeve of the impeccable suit they dressed him in, pulled up the white silk shirt. His arms were clean. There were no needle marks, no trails of blown veins of an addict. The skin was smooth, immaculate, except for a single purple mark, recent and brute, in the crook of the left arm. The mark of the fatal injection, the mark of someone held down and injected by force. I caressed that cold arm for the last time. I know the truth, my love, I whispered, tears finally falling on his suit. They can write whatever they want in the newspapers, but I know. The rest of the day was a theater of hypocrisy. The church filled with people who didn't care. Bankrupt aristocrats, curious people who read the scandal in the paper, people who went there to see the Black Widow and the addict count. They passed by me in the greeting line, murmuring condolences with their mouths, while eyes judged me. I saw what they thought. Look there, the American. Her father's money didn't save him. Must have been her who led him down the bad path. I stood there, stoic, dressed in black from head to toe, hiding my swollen eyes behind a lace veil. I didn't give them the pleasure of seeing me crumble. After everything ended, I had no time to investigate. French society, which tolerated me because of Louis's title and my father's money, turned against me with brutal speed. Friends disappeared, invitations ceased, and then came the lawyers. Distant cousins of Louis, people I had never seen in my life, appeared with papers and court orders. Alleged that due to the immoral circumstances of death and debts Louis supposedly had contracted in secret, another lie, the chateau and properties would go into litigation. I was advised to leave for the children's sake, they said, to avoid more scandals. I had money, could have fought, could have hired the best lawyers in Europe and fought for every stone of that castle. But I was broken, looking at those walls and only seeing his absence, looking at the gardens where we had walked and only feeling the bitter taste of betrayal. I decided to leave. Leaving was the saddest thing I ever lived. Many of you will ask, why didn't she fight? Why didn't she tear Paris apart to find justice for her husband? But my dears, when you are Walter Robinson's daughter, you learn to smell danger in the air. Running wasn't cowardice. It was the only way to keep his children alive. But returning to the lion's den in Missouri might be an even greater risk. Many of you will ask, why didn't you fight? Why didn't you tear Paris apart to find justice for your husband? But my dears, when you are Walter Robinson's daughter, you learn to smell danger in the air. I knew the hand that orchestrated that death was too big, too ruthless for a young widow to fight. Running wasn't cowardice. It was the only way to keep his children alive. Mason was 16 at the time. He was already a tall man like his father, with the same brown eyes. He read the newspapers. He heard the whispers in the village. He saw his mother treated like the addict's widow. He helped me pack suitcases in silence, with an expression of contained hatred that scared me. Harper, 13, cried in corners. The twins, Caleb and Joshua, 10 years old, didn't understand why we had to leave the house where they were born. We sold what we could, packed the rest, and left the Chateau de Beaumont behind. There was no farewell party, no hugs. We left as fugitives, expelled from the fairy tale life, which in the end was nothing but a house of cards built on rotten ground. On the plane back to America, I looked at the clouds outside and thought of the cruel irony of my life. I was sent to Europe as merchandise, to buy respectability. I returned to Missouri as a dishonored widow, bringing 4 orphaned children and a suitcase full of traumas. We landed in St. Louis under suffocating heat. My father was on the tarmac waiting, surrounded by security, with that impeccable suit and dark glasses. He hugged me, then looked at me, then at the grandchildren and said, "Welcome back. The ranch is ready for you." I was 34 years old. Was a widow, billionaire, mother of 4 children, and felt as if my life had ended. I returned to my father's golden cage, but this time I knew exactly where the bars were, and knew no matter how much I ran, my family's dirty money would always exact its price in blood. The first months back in America were like living underwater. Everything happened in slow motion, sounds arrived muffled, and I felt constant pressure in my chest, preventing me from breathing deep. My mother received me not as a shattered widow, but as a prodigal daughter returning to the nest. She arranged the east wing of the big house for me and the children. Enormous rooms decorated with jacaranda furniture and Egyptian cotton sheets. She acted as if Louis's death was just a sad inconvenience, something we shouldn't mention so as not to spoil digestion. "You need to keep busy, Evelyn," she said, "organizing charity teas with ladies of Missouri society. Life goes on. You are young, rich, have a title of nobility, can't bury yourself alive." But that was exactly what I did. I buried myself. Only instead of earth I used silk, diamonds, and empty afternoons playing cards. I assumed the role expected of me, the widowed countess. It was a character I played. Dressed in black, an elegant mourning, not depressive. Went to my father's dinners, smiled at politicians who continued frequenting the ranch, now without military uniforms, wearing suits of restored democracy. They kissed my hand, murmured, "Poor Evelyn," and then went back to talking business and horses. I saw money circulate, saw briefcases arriving by helicopter, saw my father, Walter, aging, but not softening, expanding the empire into legal mining and shell companies abroad. I knew that luxury paying for my children's school and my trips to spas in Europe came from the same dirty place as always, but I didn't care anymore. My capacity for indignation had died in that hotel room in Paris. I became an accomplice through silence, a perfect socialite. The worst, however, was seeing what the ranch did to my children. Mason, my maase, was 16 when we arrived. He was full of anger at France, anger at lies about his father, anger at me for not fighting more. And my father, cunning as a fox, saw in that anger an opportunity. "Leave the boy with me," said my father one afternoon, watching Mason punch a sandbag in the ranch gym. "He needs direction, needs to learn to be a man." I should have stopped it. Should have taken my children and fled anywhere, far from Walter Robinson's influence. But I was too tired, too weak, so I let it happen. I saw my father mold Mason in his image and likeness, taught the boy to shoot, to negotiate, to intimidate, took Mason to closed-door meetings, showed how money washed honor, how power bought law. Mason absorbed everything. He wanted to be strong, to never be humiliated again like we were in Europe. At 20, he no longer looked like Louis's gentle son. He looked like a younger, harder version of my father. He treated me with respect, but there was a cold distance between us. He blamed me, and he was right. Harper, my daughter, reacted differently. She shrank, became a silent girl who spent days reading or riding alone on the property's most distant trails. She was afraid of her grandfather, afraid of her older brother, and I think she pitied me, grew up surrounded by luxury, but with a sad look of someone knowing she is in a cage. The twins, Caleb and Joshua, were sent to boarding schools in New England as soon as they were old enough, grew up distant, coming to visit only on holidays, oblivious to the heavy secrets of the big house. They used the money, enjoyed the name, but didn't want to know the origin. The 80 seconds turned into the 90 seconds. The world changed out there. The dictatorship ended. Currency changed names several times. Technology arrived, but at the ranch time seemed frozen. We were an island of feudal power in the middle of rural Missouri. I spent my days managing nothing, chose dinner menu, directed gardeners, bought clothes I had nowhere to wear. Sometimes at night I took Louis's old letters, those he wrote me when traveling, and read until memorizing every comma. It was the only moment I allowed myself to feel. The rest of the time, I was anesthetized. I had lovers, of course. I can't pass the image of a saint to you. Discreet men, usually from outside our circle, whom my father tolerated, provided they didn't create problems. But none of them mattered, were physical distractions for spiritual loneliness. I didn't let anyone in for real. My heart was locked in a coffin in Paris. Reached 50, carrying the fatigue of someone who lived 100. The mirror returned a well-told lie. Firm skin, no wrinkles, and that blessed genetics of our people that time seems to respect. As they say in our community, our skin does not betray our age easily, and on the outside, I was living proof of that. When I walked beside Harper, already in her 30 seconds, they stopped us on the street to ask if we were sisters. Even my grandchildren said they were my children. On the outside, we were the perfect family. My children were all married, set for life, but I knew the truth behind those photo albums. My father, old Walter, hadn't lost the habit of controlling our blood's destiny, just got more sophisticated. With me, he used authority and commercial contract. With my children, he used induction. He didn't force anyone blatantly. No. He just introduced, organized the right dinners, put strategic people in their path, and went planting the idea in their heads, whispering advantages until they thought they had chosen for love. But deep down, every son-in-law and daughter-in-law sitting at that table had been handpicked by him. The year was 2000. I was 53 and had already gotten used to the idea that my love life was a closed book on the shelf. I was the countess, the untouchable widow, the matriarch who scared men, until my father hired a new veterinarian to take care of the ranch's most valuable thoroughbreds. His name was Travis. He arrived on a Tuesday morning to examine a colt that had hurt itself on the fence. I was passing by the stables and stopped to observe. He didn't see me. I saw a tall man, broad shoulders, dealing with the frightened animal with impressive calm. He spoke softly to the horse, stroked the animal's neck with firmness and affection. When he turned and saw me, he took off his hat, had an easy smile, white teeth, and eyes that seemed to laugh before the mouth. "Sorry about the dust," he said. "The colt gave trouble." "Do you have a way with them, doctor?" I replied. He was 38, 15 years younger than me. But the moment he looked at me, age disappeared. He didn't look at me like the owner of the powerful Walters Ranch. He looked at me as a woman, and it had been decades since anyone looked at me like that. Started slowly. A coffee after veterinary consultations, a conversation about horse breeds turning into conversation about life. He was simple, son of farmers from Tennessee, spoke with that drawl accent, reminding me of good things, said he admired my strength, that I was the most elegant woman he had ever seen, that mourning hadn't erased my shine. I was needy. That is the naked truth. Loneliness is a desert, and when someone offers you a glass of water, you don't ask if the water is poisoned. You drink. 3 months later, he kissed me for the first time. It was in the ranch office, late at night, while reviewing some feed invoices. He held my hand, said he couldn't pretend it was just work anymore, and kissed me. It wasn't a shy kiss. It was a kiss of someone who knows what he wants. I felt alive again, felt desired. When we went public with dating, the house turned into hell. My children hated it. Mason, who already managed almost everything with my father, was the worst. Mom, for God's sake, the guy is a salaried vet. He's old enough to be my older brother. Don't you see he wants your money? Don't you want me to be happy, Mason? I retorted, offended. Do you want me to wear black for the rest of my life? I don't want you to be naive, he shouted. The guy appeared out of nowhere, full of compliments. This is a scam, Mom. My father Walter was quieter, which was worse. He ordered Travis's life investigated, turned his past in Tennessee upside down. Bank accounts, old jobs. The boy is clean, said my father, throwing a folder on my desk. Clean even too much. Sometimes, the devil wears the mask of a man with no past. My father looked for enemies, for debts, for criminal records, but he forgot one thing. The true monsters often hide best in the guise of decent men who love children and animals. That cleanliness was the most terrifying mask of all, and we were too blinded to see it. Has no debts, no crazy ex-wife, no police record, just a broke vet, see? I said, victorious. He is a good man, or is a man who knows how to hide tracks well, grumbled my father. But if you want to marry him, marry. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Do you know what really made me say yes? It wasn't just loneliness, nor his charm. It was Louis's memory. One night, while looking at the empty ceiling of my room, I remembered how I hated, at the beginning of my first marriage, the fact that Louis lived trapped in deceased Catherine's memory. I thought that a waste, an affront to the living. And suddenly reality shock hit me like a slap. I had turned into Louis. I was doing with my life exactly what he did with his before me. Decided right there I wouldn't be the eternal widow. Decided I would give life a chance, just as Louis ended up giving a chance to me so many years ago. And I married a year after we met in a discreet ceremony at the ranch chapel. I was radiant. Travis cried at the altar when he saw me enter, said I was his queen, that I was the woman he asked God for. He moved into the big house that same night. Took over stable administration, taking huge weight off my back. He was attentive, affectionate, brought me flowers from the garden without reason, massaged my feet after a long day. With my children, he tried to be a friend, but kept respectful distance, knowing he was treading on mined ground. 3 years had passed since my marriage to Travis. 3 years I considered the best since Louis's death. Woke up every day with someone beside me. Someone who kissed me before leaving for work. Someone who returned late afternoon, smelling of hay and sweat, but smiling when seeing me. Travis had become part of the family, not an accepted part. With enthusiasm by my children, who still looked at him with poorly disguised mistrust, but a tolerated part. And for me, that was enough. I was 58 and felt rejuvenated, had gone back to dressing with more care, choosing colorful dresses instead of eternal black, laughing loud during dinners. My mother Patricia commented approvingly how I was radiant, how marriage did me good. Even my father Walter, already 79, but still with that eagle eye missing nothing, seemed to have accepted Travis. It was in May 2005 that the world collapsed one more time in my life. Joshua, one of the twins, had a 6-year-old daughter, Chloe. A beautiful little girl, dark curls and huge brown eyes, always laughing, always running through the ranch gardens when visiting. Joshua and wife Megan had planned an anniversary trip to Hawaii, 10 days of beach, just the two, to rekindle romance worn by routine. "Mom, can you keep Chloe?" Joshua asked me 2 weeks before the trip. "I know it's a long time, but Megan really needs this time away, and Chloe loves staying here." "Of course you can leave her," I replied, thrilled with the idea of having the granddaughter around. "It will be great. We'll ride horses every day, make cookies with Madame Laurent's recipe. It will be a party." Travis was beside me when Joshua made the request. He smiled and said, "It will be good to have a child around here. Livens up the house." Joshua looked at Travis with that expression I knew well, mistrust, evaluation, the type of look my children always gave my second husband, but just nodded and thanked. Chloe arrived on a Sunday afternoon, bringing her Barbie backpack full of clothes and toys. She hugged me tight, shouted Grandma, with that high voice melting my heart, and then ran to see horses. Travis went after her, offering to show new colts born the previous week. First days were wonderful. Chloe woke early and jumped on my bed, asking for pancakes at breakfast. Spent mornings in stables, where she learned to brush horses with special brush Travis bought just for her. Afternoons, swam in pool, went to movies, did lots of things. Travis was attentive to Chloe, very attentive. Carried her, told stories before sleep, played hide and seek in corridors. I stood there, leaning on doorframe, finding that most beautiful thing in world. And always, same thought came, with bitter taste at end. This man was born to be father. It's a pity. A waste that we will never have children together. My time to conceive passed. Menopause closed that door, and I can't give him only thing missing. It was on 4th day I started noticing something. Chloe was quieter, less expansive. When Travis entered room, she stopped playing and stood still, eyes wide, like bird paralyzed in presence of cat. I attributed to missing parents, must be finding routine strange. Child is like that, has phases, but signs continued, discreet like splinters entering skin. "Bath time," Chloe started complaining. "Hurts, Grandma," she said, pointing down, to intimate region. "Hurts when pee." My heart tightened. "Where hurts, my love?" She pointed again, awkwardly, little face reddening. "There burns." Examined her carefully. Was little red, irritated. "Must be rash, my angel, or new soap gave allergy." Will put ointment, bathed her with warm water, used neutral soap, applied ointment, put clean panties, and promised if continued hurting, would take her to doctor next day. That night, Chloe didn't want to sleep in guest room we prepared for her. "Want to sleep with you, Grandma?" asked, holding my hand tight. "Please?" "Of course, my love," replied, finding strange, but not wanting to contradict her. She slept clinging to me, little body tense even in sleep, as if afraid of something. I slept in room with her and left Travis. It was on 8th day truth exploded in my face and was no way to close eyes. Was night. Joshua called me. Was happy. Telling about trip. I was on phone in living room, and when we started talking, time flew. Stayed long time talking, but he got sad, voice wilted, wanted to talk to Chloe, but called too late. She was already sleeping long time. Stayed more time in living room alone. Times later, when returned, climbed stairs in absolute silence, stepping light not to wake girl. But when reached corridor, heard noise coming from her room. Door was ajar, not completely closed, as used to leave, but open just a crack, and through crack saw. Travis was on knees beside bed, pants down to floor. He touched himself, masturbated with slow, rhythmic movements, breathing heavy, eyes fixed on Chloe. She slept innocently, turned to wall, back to him. Scene was absolute horror. Her panties were down and pink nightgown up. World stopped. Scream stuck in throat for second, seemed eternity, until exploded. Entered room, pushing door violently. Travis jumped, panic stamped on sweaty face, trying to pull up pants, stammering excuses making no sense. Went at him, fists closed. He didn't fight back, just defended. Chloe woke scared, of course, even more when realized panties down. Pulled up panties anyway, picked Chloe up. She was crying, scared by my screams, and ran to my parents' wing. Trembling, sobbing, bitter taste of bile in mouth. Tried to find alternative explanation. Any explanation wasn't that horrendous truth imposing itself before me. But there was no other explanation. My husband, man I loved, shared my bed. I brought inside my house, inside my family, was masturbating looking at my 6-year-old granddaughter. The feeling wasn't just disgust. It was the total collapse of her faith in humanity. Evelyn had invited a wolf into her sanctuary simply to cure her own loneliness. Please, be careful of those who seem too perfect and trust a child's intuition over an adult's appearance. This regret is something she will carry to her grave. But how the Robinson family handles this monster is something you won't believe. The feeling wasn't just disgust. It was the total collapse of my faith in humanity. I had invited a wolf into our home simply to cure my own loneliness. Please, be careful of those who seem too perfect and trust a child's intuition over an adult's appearance. This regret is something I will carry to my grave. I had already failed to protect her, hadn't I? I brought a monster inside the house, left her alone with him. How many times? How long didn't I notice? What else did he do I didn't see? Guilt crushed me. Climbed stairs like soldier going to war. Every step measured, controlled. I was beyond anger now. Was in place of deadly calm, where emotions didn't reach me anymore. Found my mother, Patricia, in dining room. Was going to sleep. She widened eyes when arrived with great-granddaughter in that state of despair. Mom, need to talk to you. Urgent. What happened? Left Chloe with older cousin Alice, 16, and went to living room. Told. Every word, like vomiting ground glass. Cut, burned, destroyed. Saw mother's face lose all color. Saw hands shaking. Saw tears start falling. My God, she whispered. My God, Evelyn, that child, that poor child. Can't tell anyone, I said. If Joshua finds out, he kills Travis and they arrest my son. Can't let that happen. So, what do we do? Asked mother, desperate. Can't simply let this man go as if nothing happened. We won't while we decide what to do with him. Voice came from door. Both turned. My father, Walter, stood there, leaning on silver-handled cane, face carved in stone. He heard everything. Dad started, but raised hand, silencing me. Where is he? Asked. Voice low, controlled, dangerous, I don't know. Took Chloe and brought here fast as could. Didn't see him since. Father nodded slowly. Patricia said to mother, without taking eyes off me, take girl to her room. Keep her busy and far from everything. Evelyn, come with me. When returned to my house, accompanied by father and security, ready for reckoning, found only silence. Coward had been faster. Knew time was up. Room was empty. Closet doors wide open, like open mouth, screaming, escape. Hangers thrown on floor. Drawers overturned. He took what managed to carry in minutes. Cash I kept in safe. Some jewelry easy to sell and documents. Smell of his perfume still in air, nauseating, but rat fled through sewer. My father, Walter, didn't scream, didn't kick furniture, stopped in middle of room, leaning on cane, looked at chaos with that terrible calm of someone who saw wars start. He won't go far, said father. No one runs from me, but hell was just starting. 2 days later, Joshua arrived. Had to tell. Would know anyway. Had to look in son's eyes and say, man I put inside house touched his daughter. Joshua didn't scream. turned pale, then red, then looked at me with contempt, cutting deeper than any knife. "How didn't you see, Mom?" he asked, voice trembling with hate for me. Fault is yours. Had no defense. Swallowed tears and accepted judgment. Because he was right. Meanwhile, brothers turned upside-down office Travis used at ranch, called computer specialist, guy working for father's money laundering scheme to crack personal computer passwords. When managed open, what found made even father, man lived in mines, saw all types, violence, gag. Wasn't just Chloe. Were hidden folders, encrypted files, photos, videos, were dozens of children. Travis wasn't just opportunist having moment weakness, was predator, professional pedophile, collecting digital trophies of victims, sealed fate, if chance, mercy, or prison, died before the computer screen. Those 13 days while Travis was missing were the longest of my life, not because of the hunt, but because of the silence in the hallways. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. Joshua refused to look at me. Every time he walked past me, he turned his face away, and that rejection hurt more than any physical blow. I spent my nights sitting outside Chloe's door, listening to her whimper in her sleep, knowing that the monster who caused her nightmares was someone I had invited into her life. I had been so desperate to cure my own loneliness that I had blindly opened the gate to a wolf. My father took over the search, using his dark connections, but I barely registered the details. Whether they found him in the Everglades or on the moon didn't matter to me. What mattered was the innocence that had been stolen under my roof. When the call finally came that they had him, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt only a cold, hollow sickness. There is no victory when the cost is a child's soul. Just as dawn broke on the 14th day, a black car entered the ranch gates and went straight to the stables. I was on the porch waiting. I watched as they pulled him from the trunk. He was wearing dirty, torn clothes and his face was swollen. He cried copiously, his legs failing him, as he was dragged by my brothers like a bag of garbage. They took him inside. My father was sitting on a hay bale, a revolver in his lap. I walked down the steps. "I need to see him," I said. Joshua tried to prevent me, but I knew. God forgive me, I knew what was going to happen, and part of me wanted it. I heard a single shot. The report echoed through the stables, causing the horses to neigh loudly in fear. Justice was done in our brutal family way, but no bullet in the world could erase the images I saw on that computer, or the fear in my granddaughter's eyes. Do not judge me. The law might have given him a few years in a cell, only for him to get out and hurt someone else. But in my father's world, there are sins that can only be washed away with blood. We didn't call the police, because sometimes the law's justice is simply not enough for a monster. The body disappeared. They say there are places on the property where the earth is soft and deep, or that quicklime solves problems fast. I never asked. I never wanted to know where he was buried. The next day, the official version spread among the staff and society. Travis had fled with a younger mistress, taking jewelry and cash from the office safe. He had abandoned his rich wife and a good job. What a scoundrel, friends whispered at the club. Poor Evelyn, deceived again. And if they question it, I asked my father later, my voice finally breaking. No one questions, he said, with the absolute certainty of a man who had bought silence his whole life. I guarantee it. And he was right. In the following days, the story became truth. Travis had abandoned Countess Evelyn, disappearing without a trace. After Travis died, I never entered a relationship again. I never wanted to. I never even took lovers. The 2 years that followed were strange. My children and daughter-in-law forgave me, thank God. But things were different. My father, Walter, continued to command the family empire. But at 82 years old, he was visibly aging. He walked slower and depended on his cane. His hearing failed him sometimes, but his mind remained sharp. He made important decisions and commanded the family with an iron fist inside a velvet glove. It was an afternoon in September 2007 when he called me for a private conversation in his office. That room had always intimidated me, with its dark wood, the smell of cigars, and walls covered in photos of politicians, businessmen, and military figures. It was the altar of Walter Robinson's power. "Sit, Evelyn," he said, pointing to the leather chair opposite his desk. His voice was hoarser lately, but it still carried authority. I sat, hands crossed in my lap, waiting. He lit a cigar against medical orders. He never cared for anyone's orders, and studied me in silence for a long moment. "Are you okay?" he asked. Finally. The question surprised me. My father never asked how I was. He gave orders, made declarations, and took decisions. Asking about feelings was not part of his repertoire. "I'm fine, Dad," I lied automatically. He took a long drag of the cigar, eyes squinting through the smoke. "You're lying! You've been dead inside since Travis left." The way he said left held a slightly sarcastic tone. It was clear we both knew the truth. I didn't answer. What was there to say? It needed to be done, he continued, almost as if justifying himself. That was rare for Walter. "No one touches my blood. No one. Understand? I understand. Dad, good." He stubbed the cigar out in the crystal ashtray with a brusque gesture. "Because I won't be here forever, Evelyn. I'm old, and I'm sick, although the doctors don't have the courage to give me the complete diagnosis to my face." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "They think they should spare me the truth, like I'm a scared child." My stomach tightened. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Cancer," he said simply. "Pancreatic. Discovered 3 months ago. Inoperable. Doctors give me 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky." He said it with the same naturalness as discussing the price of a horse. I was paralyzed. "Dad, I don't want crying, Evelyn. Not now." He got up, leaning heavily on his cane, and walked to the window facing the racetracks. "I built all this from zero, you know that. My great-grandparents were born in chains, and my parents were sharecroppers. I refused that fate. I went into the mines at 12 years old, just a child. I saw men kill for a gold nugget. I saw women sell themselves for a plate of food. I saw humanity at its worst. Listening to him, my heart turned to ice. For years, I had tried to separate my luxury from his crimes, pretending that the silk I wore wasn't stained with blood. But in that moment, looking at my dying father, the terrible truth about Louis finally settled in my soul. Louis hadn't just died because of bad luck or enemies. He died because he married me. He died because he touched Robinson's money. My father's obsession with making us somebodies had cost the life of the only man who loved me for who I was, not what I was. We weren't just new money. We were cursed money, and I had dragged an innocent man into our curse. He turned, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in eyes that were always hard. "When I die," he said, returning behind the desk, "the empire will be divided. Everything is documented, registered, and shielded from legal contests. Your mother keeps the mansion and a lifetime income. I don't want her in a nursing home. I heard the boys will divide the companies, mining, agribusiness, investments. What about you?" He opened a drawer and took out a thick envelope. "You keep the ranch." He pushed the envelope in my direction. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were deeds and legal documents transferring complete ownership of the ranch to me. All the land, the horses, the staff, it was in my name. Evelyn Christina Robinson of Beaumont. Billions in land, race animals, and cutting-edge facilities. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my gratitude feeling hollow. Money had never bought what I really wanted. He died 4 months later, not the 6 they predicted. The cancer consumed him aggressively, transforming an imposing man into a fragile, yellow figure who could barely leave his bed. I was beside him in his last days. I held the hand that had beaten miners, squeezed triggers, and signed dirty agreements. The hand that built an empire on bones and stolen profits. "Evelyn," he murmured, in his last moments of lucidity. His voice was so weak, I needed to lean in to hear, "Forgive me." The question shocked me. Walter Robinson never asked for forgiveness in his life. "For what, Dad?" "Selling you," he said, his eyes watering. "It was the first time I saw him cry, making you marry the Frenchman, using you as a chess piece. You deserve to choose your own life." Tears ran down my face before I could control them. "I forgive you, Dad. I always forgave you." It took a lifetime of control and a deathbed for him to finally see his daughter as a person, not a chess piece. It's a powerful reminder that forgiveness is often for the survivor, not the sinner. Evelyn's journey isn't over yet, though. Stay with me to see how she transforms this legacy of pain into something beautiful in her final years. He smiled, a weak but true smile, and closed his eyes. He departed hours later in the silence of dawn, with my mother holding his hand firmly. We knew the time was coming, but when it happened, the floor disappeared, and I felt like a lost girl again. My mind traveled far from that room, crossing the ocean to France, to the time I married Louis. I remembered my birthday. I was far from home, missing them, and suddenly they appeared at the chateau. My father, a busy man, had crossed the Atlantic, faced hours of flight and road travel, exhausted but radiant, just to be with me the day I completed 18 years, the genuine joy on his face, seeing that I was worth the heritage. He loved me in his way, controlling, brute, implacable. But he loved me with a huge strength, and despite everything, I loved him back. The funeral was immense. Politicians, businessmen, and celebrities appeared to pay respects to the legendary Walter Robinson. There were speeches about his entrepreneurial vision, his love for family, and his generosity. No one mentioned the dark side. The reading of the will took place a week after the burial at the family lawyer's office in St. Louis. We were all there. My mother Patricia, my 4 brothers, and the adult grandchildren. The lawyer, a gray-haired man who had worked for my father for decades, read the terms in a monotone voice. My mother received the main mansion and a fortune in stocks and investments to guarantee she lived like a queen until the end of her days. My brothers divided the companies, each responsible for a sector of the empire. James took mining, Robert took agribusiness, and the others took investments and urban properties. And me, as promised, I got the ranch. There was an additional clause my father mentioned. Part of the profits from all companies would be distributed equally among all the grandchildren, including mine. Mason, Harper, Caleb, and Joshua would receive millions a year for the rest of their lives, without working a day, if they didn't want to. Your father wanted to ensure the next generation was protected, explained the lawyer. Extremely generous. Generous wasn't the word. He preferred controller. The years followed, and I merged completely with the ranch's administration. I became obsessed with every detail. Horse lineages, reproduction contracts, competitions, and auctions. I woke before the sun rose. I spent the whole day in the stables, on the tracks, or in the office. When night fell, I fell into bed, too exhausted to think, to feel, or to remember. The staff respected me, but they also feared me a little. I had turned into a female version of my father, demanding, controlling, and implacable with errors. No one crossed Evelyn of Beaumont. No one wanted to be on my blacklist. My children visited occasionally, always with that distant education that fulfills a family obligation. Mason was completely immersed in the family business, working with his uncles, expanding the empire. He was cold, efficient, and an unscrupulous businessman, exactly what his grandfather had molded him to be. When he visited, we talked about horses and finances, never feelings. We never spoke of Louis, France, or the happy days when he was a child at the chateau. That boy had died and been replaced by this armored version. The twins, Caleb and Joshua, followed different paths. Caleb became a doctor, working in a private hospital in New York, using the surname Beaumont to open doors while keeping his distance from the dirty family fortune. Joshua became a lawyer, a specialist in corporate law, defending big companies in billion-dollar lawsuits. They visited on Christmas, birthdays, and Mother's Day, polite, but distant. We were strangers connected by blood and money, nothing more. And Harper. Harper barely spoke to me. Her visits were rare, tense, and punctuated by heavy silences or superficial conversations. She married a university professor, a gentle man with no financial ambitions who loved her for who she was, not what she had. They had 2 children. Harper protected those children with the ferocity of a lioness, never leaving them alone with me, never allowing them to stay at the ranch for more than a few hours. The message was clear. She didn't trust me to protect her children, and I couldn't blame her. Chloe grew up. I saw that girl transform into a teenager, then a young adult. She had been in therapy since she was 6, dealing with the traumas Travis had planted. Megan never told me the details. Whatever Chloe remembered or repressed, the real damage was done. I carried that guilt like a cross. My mother, Patricia, remained firm in the main mansion. At 98 years old, she is a lucid survivor, a woman who passed decades in silence, seeing horrors around her, now lives practically inside the chapel. She prays obsessively, asking forgiveness for sins of omission, for everything she let my father do without intervening. The 2 girls who care for her treat her with affection. Her mind is sharp. We spend afternoons talking, remembering the past. Sadness visited with force in 2021. I lost my older brother to a fulminant heart attack. It was a hard blow. He had passed his life in the shadow of our father, implacable, hard, focused only on money, but the end surprised us all. When the will was discovered, we learned he had regretted it. He left a huge part of his fortune to charity. It was a slap in the face. I stopped and looked inside myself. I had always judged the kindness of others, but where was mine? I felt like trash, sitting on infinite money, seeing people in need, and doing nothing. You can't take it with you, as they say. There are no pockets in a shroud. I decided I would take nothing. I started to give back. Not just signing a check to clear my conscience, but really doing it. I built a daycare in the neighboring town that today feeds and cares for 200 children who have nowhere else to stay. I reformed the hemodialysis wing of the public hospital, buying machines that save lives daily. I created a scholarship fund for young, poor Black students to go to the best colleges, giving them the chance my father had to buy so they could conquer it on merit. I don't want to brag, the list is immense. Today, when my mother and I pray together in the chapel, the prayer has changed. I thank God for waking me in time to use the family empire to wipe tears of need instead of causing pain. Now, as I sit alone in this vast room my father built on ambition and blood, I no longer feel lonely. The ghosts of the past have finally been laid to rest. I have used the family's dirty money to build schools and hospitals, trying to wash away the sins committed by the Robinson bloodline. I realized that while we cannot choose where we are born or who our parents are, we always have the power to choose how we end our story. I chose love over hate, generosity over greed, and Louis, the only true love of my life, must be smiling somewhere. Before I close this chapter, I want to ask you one thing. Have you ever traded your true happiness just to satisfy your family's expectations? And if you could choose again, would you have the courage to walk a different path? Please share your story in the comments below. Do not hesitate, for here we do not judge, we only listen. Thank you for spending time with an old woman of 78. Live brilliantly, so you have no regrets when your own sunset comes.